There is some math in this class. There's not a lot of math in this class. Before we get into the math, I want to just kind of introduce you to some words, some concepts, some terms um, that you might expect to hear. I know I know some of us don't mind the math. I know others of you think is math is a four-letter word that I shouldn't be saying out loud, right? So, it is what it is. This is what I have to tell you about the math. Everybody listen to me. There are only 7 math questions on your exam out of what? 80 and 60 was 140. So there's only 7, y'all. So with that being said, the math alone can't fail you. You can miss all the math and still get your real estate license. So everybody repeat after me. We are not going to stress out over the math. Do we need to say that again? We are not going to stress out over the math. So everybody take a big deep breath. I'm not saying it's not a big deal. It's really not. Either you get it and you can get a couple extra points, or you don't, and you get your real estate license. I'd rather have y'all stress out over agency than the math. Is everybody with me? So this is how math works. We're going to introduce you, like I said, I'm going to introduce you to some concepts that we're going to use. We're going to do our property taxation math, which is where we are with our liens. How this works in class is we have, we'll look at some examples, talk about things together. I have 1 or 2 problems that I will let you guys work on your own so you can kind of get going on it. Um, and then we'll work those together so you can see it and you have the recording. Some of you may need more time with the math than the others. So if you're one of those people that needs more time with the math, you have the recording. You can always go back and watch it at your own pace. And remember, on the recording, you can pause me, you can rewind me, okay? There's also practice in Learn, Test, Pass. So you'll be able to get practice, prepare for your exam. But guys, we are never going to spend more time than what we absolutely have to on the math, and we are not going to stress about the math. Is everybody good so far? Are any anxieties relieved at this point? Thank you. All right. I got a lot of people that don't like math. I get it. I guess I'm the nerd that does, but hey, I don't spell, I do math, right? That's my that's how I work. So, let's introduce us to a few things that we just may see. Another thing I do for Lane is I do tutoring, but in tutoring, oftentimes what I get is math tutoring. And I've been doing math tutoring for Lane since like 2012, something like that. I've been doing that for her for a long time. Hands down, without a doubt, the concern I get is I don't know how to read these word problems and interpret them. I don't know, once I read the paragraph, what do I do with this information? 80% of the math is knowing the formula. If you don't know the formula, you read that problem and you don't know what to do with the numbers. So anytime we come to math, anytime we come to a formula, I highly recommend that formulas go on a flashcard because you need to memorize those. And I think one of the best ways to memorize things is put it on a flashcard, that redundancy, and ask yourself over and over again. Guys, straight up, if you don't know the formula and you get to a math question and you don't know what to do with those numbers, you might as well put down C or B or A or whatever your favorite one is and move on. Otherwise, you're just spending precious test time waiting on the numbers to magically do something. So I'm a firm believer that to get the math, the biggest chunk of it is knowing the formula. So you guys will want, I recommend either putting it on a flashcard or take your notebook and take a blank piece of paper, write formulas across the top. And as we do the math, fill your page so you have everything right here. Okay. The other thing is just understanding the words. So for example, Welcome. So for example, if you're reading a math problem and you see the word of, that's just telling you to multiply. It's telling you to say, take the percentage of something. That's just a fancy way of telling you to multiply. So for example, if the problem were to tell you that something maybe is 25% of 350,000, you're going to take your calculator. You're going to say 350,000 times 25%. And for fun, why don't y'all tell me in the chat what that number is? Let's get warmed up. We're doing our warm-ups. And I don't want you to unmute. I want everybody in the chat. So I know that I have everybody. I need to see everyone in the chat. This is that class participation thing. So when you say 25% of 350,000, I'm seeing y'all come in. So we see 25% of 350,000. Remember, you guys, I just did it on my phone to see if it would work. Your calculator on your phone is a lot smarter than the calculators you can use for the test. I just picked my phone up and did 25% times 350,000, and I got the answer. Your basic calculator for your exams, whether you have it or it's on the computer, it's not that smart. So we need to make sure, this is why I want you guys practicing on this one, giving yourself a chance, and get off of the one on your phone. So what we're saying, what your basic calculator recognizes is 350,000 times 25%. Let me do it like this. 350,000 times 25%. And when you put that into your calculator, we need to change that color. I'll do that next. You're going to get 87,500. So that word of, that's the first note you should have in the math section of your notebook. When you see that word of, that's telling you to multiply something. Or that's it. You could also do 350,000. Let me change the color here. 350,000. That's not gonna, I can't see that. 350 times 0.25. So 25% is the same as 0.25. You move that decimal over 2 places to the right to get a percentage. I recommend do rate or percent. Pick your favorite and stick with it. You start toggling around, you're going to get yourself confused. So you either use the 25% or you move your decimal over 2 places to the left and do 0.25. Either way, you're going to get 87,500. So let's look at a problem together. I want you guys to read it. When you guys come to a math problem, any problem really, but specifically when you come to a math problem, the first thing I want you to do is just read. Have you guys done enough practice questions yet to know that they like to put distractors in the questions? Y'all know what a distractor's job is? To distract you. You know where they really, really like to put distractors? In the math problems. So how do you weed out the distractors? Because you know the formula. If you know the formula, you know what numbers of all those numbers you need to use. So the first thing I want you to do when you come to math problem is just read it. And then I want you to ask yourself, what is this problem asking me for? Because that's going to allow you to know what your X is, what you're solving for. And if it doesn't fit in the formula, then it's a distractor. So I'm going to give you another problem. You're going to read it. Then you're going to pick up your pencil, your calculator. You're going to solve it. Once again, you're going to tell me in a private chat what the answer is. So let's talk about some commission, and tell me what you think the answer is in the chat. So let's see what we got. Let's just read it first. Pencils down. Sit on your hands if you have to. It's so tempting when we see a math problem, just pick our calculators up and start doing something with the numbers. Just read, breathe and read, read and breathe. Lane sells her home for $250,000, pays her real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? Now, these problems, when we get there, are really like this long. We're just easing it. But we know what we're looking for. What this problem is asking me for is how much is the firm going to collect? And it's 5% of the sales price. So what does that word of tell me to do? Tells me to take the sales price times 5%. 5% of the sales price on your calculator, 250,000 times 5%. And as you guys told me, the commission collected is 12,500. Note, that is the firm's commission. Remember, it's the firm's listing. Your firm will take that 12,500 and pay you from that. So when we get into our commission math, we're going to learn how you calculate the firm commission and then how you can calculate yours. So let me ask you this. What if somewhere in it, it had that the list price was, I don't know, 260. I'm making numbers up. So now the problem says Lane lists her home for sale for 260 and sells it for 250. What's your distractor?
The
The
list,
list,
the list
yeah,
price, yeah.
because it doesn't matter what you list it for, we get paid on what it closes for. So again, when we know in these formulas, is going to help us know what numbers to use. Everybody good so far? Oh my, Kiana, I'm glad. Goodness, I'm glad you're okay. All right, I'm going to introduce you guys to a tool that I use as often as I possibly can. I think if you can get this, you can get the majority of the math. So I do want you guys to write this down. And this is something called the T-bar. So go ahead and jot this down just like it is. And then we're going to talk about what all of this means. So the T-bar is, well, it is my favorite tool. And I think if we can understand the T-bar, I think we can use this for most of the math, not all of it, but we can use this for most of the math. For the most part, when you read a word problem that has rate or percent in it, if you don't know to do anything else, just throw down a blank T-bar. We'll see an example in just a second and just start plugging the numbers in. So the T-bar consists of three variables. I have the part, the whole, and the percent or the rate. The part, generally speaking, is going to be smaller than the whole. So when we're looking at two numbers, maybe for example, commission and sales price, we're going to put the smaller of the two numbers on top. Not even thinking about it, which number's smaller, my commission or the sales price? Unfortunately,
Your commission.
commission,
Commission.
right? So when you're dealing with commission or sales price, annual taxes or assessed value, just asking yourself, gee, which number's smaller? That's the number that's going to go on top. Then you got the bigger number on the bottom left. The rate or percent, hold up for my absolute word. The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. You don't even have to think about where to put the rate or percent. The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So when you start plugging your T-bar in, you know rate or percent, put it in the right, and then it's a matter of figuring out the other two numbers. The back fourth line means divide. The up down line means multiply. So when I look at the T-bar, I can solve for the part, I can solve for the whole, I can solve for the rate or percent. The T-bar actually gives me three formulas. The T-bar tells me that the part equals the whole times the percent. The whole equals the part divided by the percent. The percent equals the part divided by the whole. Good. Such a fan. This is really where I geek out, is with the T-bar. I use this thing to pay my bills. I mean, seriously, once it, because I'm like, okay, this is how much I got paid, and this is how much bills I have, which numbers goes on top, which number. But seriously, once it clicks, you're going to find yourself utilizing it. So we're looking at three different formulas. So you guys got choices. You could either work with me and give the T-bar a shot, or you got to memorize all these formulas. Now, like I said, I can't always use the T-bar. Sometimes there are formulas that we just have to memorize. So let's take what we already know the answer to. Does everybody have this wrote down in front of you where you can reference it? And that's what this is. It's just like T-bar 101. We're going to apply it in just a minute. So let's take what we just did. Let's talk about Lane again, selling her home for $250, paying the firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? I have read the problem. I know when I read this problem, I saw the word rate or percent. And for me, the first thing I do is plug in the percent, because the rate, or I still can't see that. I'm struggling with colors here. Hang on, you guys. I can't see the white when I type, so there's going to be errors, but it's the best one that shows up on the screen. So that's what we do. So the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. You don't have to think about it. Just throw it in the bottom right. Now I'm left with a sales price at 250,000. And the question wants to know what's the commission. You guys just told me which one's going to be smaller, right? Which tells us that our sales price is the whole and goes in the bottom left. And my X, my unknown variable, is the commission. The up down line of the T-bar tells me to multiply. So I take 250,000 times 5%. And that gives us our commission. What was it? 12,500? Yeah, 12,500. No worries. So understanding that the rate or percent always, are y'all hearing me? Don't even think about it. Put it in the bottom right. The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. And where the confusion comes in, what number goes on top, what number goes on bottom. If it's not so clear about which number's smaller and which number's bigger, this is really why I'm a fan of the T-bar, because it allows me to kind of play around with the numbers and see which one makes more sense. So let's say, for example, I'm in the heat of the test and I'm a little stressed out because test stress is a very real thing. And I'm a little stressed out and I read this problem. Well, Julie said the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. But now for the life of me, I can't remember if 250,000 goes on the left or on top. So you know what we're going to do? Instead of staring at a blank piece of paper and waiting on the numbers to do something, we're going to draw 2 T-bars and we're going to play around with that 250,000 and that X. The back fourth line means divide. So now if my X, I take 250 and divide it by 5%. Anybody want to tell me what your commission is now?
$5 million.
$5 million.
5 million.
Heck yeah. You sell one house and you can retire. You're all set, right? That was that. Is that realistic to collect a $5 million commission on a 200? We wish, right? There'd be a lot more people in this class. I wouldn't be here because I've already sold that house. You guys with me? Hands down, without a doubt, in math tutoring, the number one question I get is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated answer to that is, do it both ways and see which one makes sense. By doing this real quick, it allows me to eliminate. I don't have to sit here and wonder, I know that wasn't right. And I can have my 12,500 and I can continue on with the test. What do we think so far about the T-bar? Head bobs, thumbs ups. I'm already getting praises in the chat. If I don't have you yet, don't worry. That's my personal goal each class, is to have 100% T-bar fans by the time I'm done. So if you're not digging it yet, don't worry. I'll get you. I'll get you. Again, I can't use this for all the math that we do, but I use it as often as I can because it's just, I think it just simplifies it. Put that rate or percent in the bottom right and then the other two numbers. Now, as we get going, these math questions are going to get longer and longer. More information, more distractors. But again, if you know the formula, you know what you plug into the T-bar and what is a distractor. So even with the cool tool of the T-bar, seriously, 80% of the math is knowing the formula. Do I have any questions so far? Oh my. So, introduction to the T-bar leads us to the first time that we can use a T-bar, and this is when we're talking about property taxes. This is the formula you need on a flashcard or on that blank piece of paper that says formula. Annual taxes is part of assessed value. The tax rate will be on the bottom right. Back fourth line means divide. Up down line means multiply. And make sure, you guys, words matter. I'm going to tell you that right now. You'll come across it in your practice. I think we even come across it tonight. What if the problem was asking for monthly taxes? Does the T-bar allow me to solve for monthly taxes? Not
No.
directly. What was that?
No, you have to divide in 12.
That's it. So I'm going to first solve for annual taxes, and then I got to make sure I take a step further and divide that by 12. This is a really big reason why I want you guys reading the math question before you pick up your pencil, before you pick up your calculator. Read, do the problem, work the problem. And then when you think you have an answer, I would like you to go back and read the problem again to make sure that the answer that you think you have is the one that they're looking for. Because if they're asking you for monthly taxes, I can promise you that the annual tax will be an answer choice. And if you say, oh, annual taxes is C, you put down C, you got it wrong, not because you don't know what you're doing, but because you didn't take that extra step to divide by 12 to get monthly. I think you guys should carefully read all of the problems, but especially the math, and that's how we can eliminate those distractors. Some math is going to take you a while. When you're taking your exams, both my exam and your state exam, I highly recommend that you always save the math for last. Remember, there's only 7 math questions. So if you get to a question, you hit next and a question pops up and you see the 4 answer choices or numbers, bookmark it and move on. Save yourself some precious study time. Don't even try to read it. A, B, C, and D are numbers. Bookmark it and move on. And once you've done everything else, then you come back and tackle the math. Suggested strategy. Yeah, D.
For the test, does it, like, if you get so many wrong, it times you out, like you just failed?
No, when you're done, you hit submit and it tells you how you, yep. Yep. Same thing with your state exam. You get automatic, you know automatically what you do, but you got to take the whole thing. Yep. So last night we started talking about, we talked about liens and that kind of good thing and property taxes. You may, let me say this. All properties in the state of North Carolina are located in a county. All properties in the state of North Carolina are subject to county taxes. They're going to give you 2 rates. They're going to give you a county rate and a city rate. But only properties in the city limits have to pay city taxes. So if it tells you a property is located outside of Greensboro city limits, then you're only going to charge them county taxes. If it's inside, these are the distractors that they like to give you. If it's inside the city limits, then you're going to charge them county and city taxes.
Julie,
Yes.
can you please repeat about the city taxes? You say if the problem say in the city, they want to charge you just county, right?
Correct.
If they're inside in the city, both.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Okay.
You got to be
got it.
in the city limits to have to pay city taxes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. We also said last night that taxes in North Carolina are the assessed value. Obviously, the problem has to tell you what that assessed value is. But the problem may, and we're getting ready to see this when we do ours together, so I just want to make sure we're good. The problem may say something like, the assessed value is 200,000 and taxes are calculated on 85% of the assessed value. So that number that goes in the bottom left, look at your T-bar where it says assessed value. Before you can plug that number in the T-bar, you would have to first find that 85% of the assessed value. So you're going to have steps to do before you get to the T-bar. You might have steps to do after the T-bar. The T-bar just kind of helps us get these big steps. So I'm going to put a math problem up. I want you all to try it. Can't hurt you. Pick your pencil up, pick your calculator up. Worst case scenario, you get it wrong and you go, oh yeah, guys, the other thing I want you to hear me say about the math, you can watch me do this all day long. Let me tell you something, I make it look really easy. The true test is whether or not you can do it without me. So when it comes to math, practice, practice, practice. That's the only way that you're going to get comfortable using these formulas, using the T-bar. But with that being said, we're not stressing about the math. We're not spending all of our study time with the math. But I do think if you give it a shot, you can get it yourself a couple extra test questions and you might even surprise yourself. So I'm going to put a problem up on the board. Everybody's going to try it. And you're going to tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. And I'll give you guys a few minutes and then we will talk about it together. So once you guys work it, we'll always come through and work it together. Is everybody ready? We excited? Oh boy. All right. So tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. Give you guys about 30 more seconds or so, and then we'll talk about it. So let's see what we got. And we overall did really good. So let's see what we got. First off, Apologies, I forgot to mention this before I gave you the problem, but I didn't want to interrupt you. So our tax rates in North Carolina are going to be an amount per 100. And this is one of these things that, one of these works that we need to do before we get to the T-bar. Not all the times, but some of the times, and specifically in this case, that word per is telling me to divide. So to find the tax rate, we would want to do the 1.35 divided by 100. North Carolina, we use an ad valorem tax rate, and ad valorem means that our tax rates are per 100. I apologize, but most of you didn't need me to say that. So good job. So what's the first thing we did? Did you pick up your calculator and just start pounding away on numbers? Not yet. Just read. Read and breathe. Breathe and read. A property has a fair market value of $250,000. The assessed value is 85% of fair market value. The property tax rate is 1.35 per 100. What is the tax bill for the year? So I've read the problem, and I may not know anything else, but I do know I saw rate or percent, so I can throw down a T-bar. Sometimes with the math, I find it helpful to start with where I want to end. And what I mean by that is to identify your X first. What's this question asking me for? My
Tax
Tax
bill.
bill for the year.
Property tax.
my
No.
annual tax bill.
Annual
What's the
tax.
T-bar tell me? Where's that number go? That's the number that is on top. And what I need to know, how I need to solve that X, the only thing I care about now are assessed value and rate of percent. So sometimes by starting with where you want to end, you can better identify the numbers that you need. So I have a fair market value of 250,000. I have an assessed value of 85% of fair market value. What's that word of tell me to do?
Multiply.
Multiply. So to find my assessed value, I'm going to take 250,000 times 85%. And we probably got 212,500. 85% of 25,000. That's my assessed value that goes, that goes in the left. And then we got to figure out the rate or percent. So I know it's 1.35 per 100, which just means 1.35 divided by 100 which gives me a rate of 0.0135. My T-bar is now complete. So to solve for X, all I have to do, the up-down line tells me to multiply. So 250,000 times 0.0135. And there's several ways you can get to this. Quite frankly, it makes no difference to me. As long as you got to $2,869. Once you round, I think you got a little bit of change there. So you round up and you got to $2,869. So what's your annual property taxes for this property? Z. Not 250. Thank you. Thank you. This is 212. Thank you. So 212,000 times 0.0135 gives us annual property taxes of C. I'm a big fan of the T-bar. I think if you practice with the T-bar a little bit, it's going to start coming into place. The good news is math in this class is scattered throughout. So it's not like we're doing all the math all at once. So this gives you time to get going, practice. And as we keep going, we don't see math again until unit 3. But we'll get to use the T-bar. We'll get to use the T-bar to figure our commission. Do you have any questions on what we're looking at? See any of the numbers in the T-bar? I still didn't get it right, did I? Third time's a charm, right? Sorry, you guys. I do not like that I can't see. Hey, she got it. My rhetorical question to you guys is, if you didn't get it right, do you see where you went wrong? And you don't have to answer me that. But that's why we practice. That's why we go through. Okay, questions? That was fun. Let's do another one. Tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. Good. Welcome back. About 30 more seconds, and then we'll talk about it together. What did you do first? Just read. Did you find some distractors when you just read? There's some distractors in this problem, aren't there? So let's see what we got. I got a property that has a fair market value of $375,000. The assessed value is 95% of fair market value. Property is located in the county. The tax rate is 0.85 county and 0.50 city per 100 of assessed value. What is the tax bill for the year? I've read the problem. I saw rate or percent, And the first thing I want you to do on your blank scratch paper is just throw down a T-bar. That's what the word rate or percent means to you. Most of the time when you see that word, we know we can do something with the T-bar. If I want to start with where I want to end, this problem once again is asking me for my annual tax bill. And I know the formula, so I know what I'm solving for is the number on top. So I'm going to identify my X because that's all I care about. That's how we eliminate, that's how we rule out distractors. My assessed value goes in the bottom left. And the problem tells me that the assessed value is 95% of fair market value. Fair market value is 375 times 95% gives me an assessed value 375 times 95 of 356 250. The number in the bottom left is 95% of fair market value. And then I got to figure out what the rate is. So I got a tax rate, I got a county tax rate, and I got a city tax rate. Am I going to use both those numbers? No, why not? They're there. They wouldn't be there for nothing, would they?
It
We're
only
just doing
properly
county.
located in the county.
Only charge them for county. They don't have to pay city taxes because they are not in the city limits. So my county taxes are 0.85 per 100. 0.85 per 100 gives me 0.0085. Up down line on the T-bar tells me to multiply. So 356 250 times 0.0085 gives me annual tax bill of, when I round, $3,028. I get 0.125 or 0.129. The distractors. And several of you tell me the distractor got you, but the answer you got when you fell into the distraction is there, right? That's what they like to do. That's what they like to do. So we took I didn't finish this out. I took my assessed value of 356 250 times 0.0085. And we got ignore that decimal there. It worked out for you though, didn't it? So 356,250 times 0.0085, what's going to be your annual tax bill this year? $3,028. Questions? Is it horrible? You've done worse things, haven't you? We're not doing bad. We're not doing bad at all. And remember, you guys, if it is horrible, just put down B or C or whatever your favorite one is. You can miss all 7 math and still get your real estate license. Does that make you feel a little better? I always say I'm not preparing you guys for a math test. I'm preparing you for a real estate exam with some math in it. All right, we got another piece of math to talk about as it relates to taxes, but I don't want to take advantage of our break. So let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we've got one more little piece to talk about, and then we'll be done with math for the night. So let's go ahead and take 10. always good when you guys come back after math. This is good. Welcome back. Two more cameras. Hey. So I'm going to take attendance. Oh, Angel, I just got you. Let me do that again to be sure. Fernanda, you're in. All right. So the math that we had discussed up to this point, again, you guys, when I say ad valorem, we're referring to property taxation in North Carolina. And the two things to know about ad valorem is it's based on assessed value, unless you're told otherwise. Always do what the problem tells you. And the other thing about ad valorem is that it's the tax rate per 100. So like we just took that county tax rate of 0.85 divided by 100 and got the rate for the T-bar of 0.0085. So ad valorem, North Carolina assessed value per 100. Other states may use a different rate, and I do not know specifically what states, and it does not matter. Zai, make sure you tell me you're back in the chat so I can count you here. Thank you. So other states, doesn't matter. Other states may use a different tax rate. The T-bar looks the same because it's still the annual taxes as part of the assessed value. We're just going to have to go about, thank you, we're just going to have to go about finding the tax rate a little bit differently. So if they're not using ad valorem, then other states may use something called a mill. And a mill is just 1/1000th. So they're going to give you the mill. You take the mill, divide it by 1,000, and that's the tax rate that goes in the T-bar on the bottom right. They may or may not tell you ad valorem is per 100. They may or may not tell you that the mill rate is per 1,000. Is everybody good so far in the differences? Ad valorem per 100, mill 1/1000th. So for example, if the problem tells you that the taxes are 8 mills, why don't you guys tell me in the chat what the tax rate would be? So the problem says 8 mills. What we know we need to do is take 8, divide it by 1,000. So now I have a rate for the T-bar of 0.008. Ad valorem is per 100. Mills are per 1,000. Remember, we're recording. So if this is too much, you can just kind of block me out for a second and come back through at your own time. This is, I tell you what, if the pandemic brought me anything good, it was teaching on Zoom where I could record. I wish I was recording before the pandemic. Honestly. Finding that silver lining. So, like I said, you guys, they're not going to tell you to divide by 1,000. They may or may not tell you to divide by 100 for ad valorem. And that's why we need to know tax rate per 100, mill per 1,000. Everybody good? You got that jotted down? You're going to reference that when you're doing math problems, right? When you're looking at that, okay? So using the same T-bar, annual taxes is part of assessed value. Tax rate goes on the bottom right. Using that same T-bar, we're now going to do a couple problems talking about mills. So tell me in a chat, A, B, C, or D. It's just the mill is just the term. It's not necessarily money. It's just a term. So it's 8 mills divided by thousands gives you the rate of 0.008. I've been accused of using that one a lot. I don't know if I meant for it to happen that way. About 30 more seconds, then we'll talk about it together. So let's see what we got. This one says a property has a fair market value of 138,000. The assessed value is 80% of fair market value. Property tax rate is 15 mils. What is the annual tax bill? Again, rate or percent. Throw down T-bar. Again, solving for that number on top. My assessed value is 80% of 138. So I get an assessed value of 110,400. So the first thing, doesn't matter which order you go. First thing I chose to do is find my 80% of fair market value. So that told me to multiply. Then I need to figure out what goes in the bottom right. 15 mils tells me I'm going to take that 15, divide it by 1,000 to get a rate of 0.015. So the number in the bottom right, our rate, 15 mils divided by 1,000, gives me 0.015. Now that my T-bar is complete, I know the up-down line equals multiply. So 110,400 times 0.015 gives me, as somebody said in the chat, trusty old C, $1,656. Okay. So same thing we did before, just playing around, little different verbiage. but understanding ad valorem per 100, mils 1000s. Questions on this one? How I filled in the T-bar, how I got C?
Miss Julie,
Yes.
how you know if the problem not say about is meals or you have to divide in 100? How you know that part? Because you are in national or state part, or how you know that?
Well, because the problem will have to tell you either ad valorem or per 100, or it'll have to give you mill rate. It's never going to give you both. So you're just always
Okay.
going to do what the problem tells you. That's right. To your
Okay.
point, Evelyn, all of your math is in the national section. You won't pick up a calculator in your state section.
Okay.
But yeah, the problem, they can't give you both. So they'll give you one or the other, and you'll know to roll with that one.
But they wanna give you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Other questions on this one? Well, I think we're having so much fun. Let's do one more. A, B, C, or D? I think some of y'all want to go back and read the problem for a third time to make sure the answer that you have is what they're looking for. Tricky, tricky. You got 30 more seconds and we'll talk about it. I believe you are. Ariana, I'll address that in just 1 second. So let's see, a property has a fair market value of 680,000 and assessed value of 90% of fair market value. If the property tax rate is 11 mils, what is the monthly tax liability? Y'all look at your formula. What's your formula got you solving for? Annual. Is the annual answer there? You better believe it. This is exactly why when you think you have an answer, go back and read it again just to make sure the answer you have is actually what they're looking for. That's okay if you made this mistake. You made it once, learn from it, and don't do it again. Fair enough? All right, so we're once again solving for that number on top. I got to start with annual property taxes because that's what the formula tells me. I got to do what the formula tells me. So I start with my annual property taxes that I'm going to solve for. I have fair market value of 680. We want assessed value of 90% of fair market value. So I have an assessed value of 612,000. And then I have 11 mills. 11 divided by 1,000 gives me 0.011, which is the rate that goes there. My T-bar is complete, so I can solve for X. Up, down line means multiply. So 612 times 0.011 gives me an annual tax bill of 6,732. And then what we like to do is say, ooh, C matches that. So I'm going to put that down. I'm going to move on. Seriously, y'all. If you're going to get it wrong, get it because you don't know what to do with it. Don't get it wrong because you don't take that extra step. There's nothing more infuriating than this. Take that extra step, divide by 12. And when we take those annual taxes and divide by 12, we have monthly taxes of $561. Questions on the T-bar or how we got $561?
Yeah, so I understand like the 680,000 multiplied by the 90% and how you got the 612, but then I get confused at the 11, what is that, divided by 1,000 and the 0.11.
Yep. So on a calculator, if we take 11 divided by 1,000, we're going to get the rate of 0.011. And the rate is what the T-bar calls for. That's the number I need to plug in there. So you're either going to divide it by 100 ad valorem or 1,000 in this case for mills.
So would you be dividing 612,000 divided by the 0.11?
Nope, we're going to multiply.
Multiply, okay.
Yep. My up down line here tells me to multiply. So 612,000 times 0.011 gives me annual taxes. Annual taxes divided by 12 gives me monthly. Yeah, Tiffany.
And we're doing 12. I'm not going to say any other number. I'm just saying 12 because it's 12 months in a year. I just wanted to add that in.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes. We're gonna get to a case where we get to later in this class, we get to take annual taxes and figure out the daily amount. So, you know, their days are different in pre-licensing world. We'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, yep. Some of you may like the T-bar, some of you may not. Quite frankly, I don't care how you do it. Just get A. All you have to do on the exams is put down A, B, C, or D. Y'all could guess A and get it right. So I don't care how you get here, just get here. If you find a different way to do the math, fantastic. Anybody else, remember back in high school, did y'all ever get ding points because you didn't do the problem the same way the math teacher did? Was that not the most frustrating thing in the whole wide world? Yeah, no. No. Show me A and you got that one right. Guys, if you're not going to do the math, if this isn't your thing and you're not going to spend your time on that, when you get to the math, just guess. Never leave a test question blank. Because if you guess right, I mean, you still got to, if you guess something, you got a 25% chance of getting it right. So even if you don't know, not even the math, even if you don't know, just pick your favorite, A, B, C, or D, and throw it in there. You got a 25% chance of getting it right. So never ever leave it blank. Never have to show me work. I just need to see your final answer. Any last questions about our property tax math? So I need to stop sharing this for 1 second because as you guys remember last night, we kind of skipped this section because it was late and we didn't want to deal with it. So bear with me just 1 second until I get back to where we need to pick up. I think I just told you guys a little fib a few minutes ago. I said we're done with math till unit 3, and that's not true. We have a little bit more to talk about in the next section. We're going to look at the final section here. But the point I wanted to make was that, the math isn't all together. You don't get all the math all at once. So what this allows us to do is work on it snippets at a time. We cover property taxation math tonight. So that's what you can work on this weekend. And I think that'll also give you practice with the T-bar. And as we get going on that, then you'll be a little bit more familiar with it. So there is some more math coming up in the next section. Maybe we'll get to it tonight. Maybe we won't. But we are going to finish out this section. Remember, this section is all about encumbrances. It's something that it's a limitation on the property. And we talked about some financial encumbrances, which are liens. We talked about some non-financial encumbrances, which might be like our covenants or, our easements. Adverse possession is always an interesting topic. The other thing we talked about where we ended last night was talking about liens and specifically that lien priority. And remember what the lien priority tells us is it puts people in order of who's going to get paid. So when the seller sells, before they get their proceeds, they have to pay off their liens. They have to pay any closing costs. They need to pay me and you if they've agreed to pay commission. And all these people are standing in line with their hand out on closing day waiting to get paid. And the very last person in the line is the seller. So when we say the seller's proceeds, they get the sales price minus what they owe everybody else in between. And what's left is theirs. We're going to talk about how we can help the seller calculate how much they're going to get from closing. Do y'all think that's a common question you're going to get from sellers? If you sell my house, how much am I going to get? Yeah. What if you have a seller that calls you and says, I can only afford to sell if I pocket X amount? Do you now have a duty to make sure that you can get them X amount? Remember, if it's important to them, then it's important to me. And if they call you up and say, I can't sell if I don't make X amount, I need to make sure that they can afford to sell. So we're going to talk, that's coming in unit 3 in our agency, but we're going to talk about how we can figure out the seller's net. And the seller's net is what do they get once everybody else is paid? Lien priority. Superior liens are always paid first. Remind me, what are superior liens?
Taxes.
Real
Real
property.
property taxes.
Special assessments.
Taxes and, I heard it again, heard it there. Not which type of special assessments? Let's make sure we're clear.
Public.
The government.
Public or government. So our superior liens, and what I mean by superior lien is they're in line first. Real property taxes are paid first, government or public superior liens after that. All other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien. Yep, which is retroactive. It goes back to when the work began. You guys got it. So finishing out this little section, when you're talking with sellers, when you are, we need to make sure part of the listing agent's job is to make sure that the seller can afford to sell. And this is where things get very personal very fast. I mean, in some cases, I just met this seller and I'm talking about what's your approximate balances on this home? How much do you owe? But guys, I'm not doing it to be nosy. I'm doing it to protect them. If they can't pay off all their liens, if they can't pay closing costs, if they can't afford, and we get to closing day and you call, or the day before closing day, and you call the seller and say, hey, tomorrow's closing and I need you to bring X amount because you have to pay because you're underwater. And the seller looks at you and says, I can't afford to do this. Game over. They can't convey with outstanding liens. So my question to you is, do you want to have the hard conversation before you list it? Or do you want to be caught off guard the day before closing and have your seller be in breach? So it's awkward, I'm not going to lie, looking at a stranger and saying, how much do you owe? But we got to do it to protect them. And of course, we also do it to protect ourselves. Federal and state taxes are paid in the order in which they're recorded. So superior liens, all other liens after that are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for that mechanics lien. North Carolina is a pure race state, which means the first one to record their lien at the courthouse, the public records, wins. That's how we determine lien priority. It's a pure race state. It's a race to the courthouse. It's a race to record. So any issues that can impact ownership? Well, liens. Liens can absolutely impact ownership. A judgment is also a lien. Remember, a judgment is a court order, maybe, I don't know, unpaid alimony, for example. That would be something that could be a judgment that would be deducted from the seller before they got paid, before they got their proceeds. We want to find out from the seller if there's been any improvements. Are there any encumbrances? Ask them, when did you put the fence up? When did you put the shed up? When you bought this house, did you have a survey done? You did? Well, let me see it, please. I'm not going to share it with the buyer. The buyer can get their own. But I want to see that the seller doesn't have any encumbrances, for example. We want to ask, we have to ask these things. Does anybody have an easement? Does anybody have a personal easement in gross? Does anybody have a license where they may have to terminate that when the seller sells? Yeah, Angel.
So like the documents, you said that they don't have to share it, but if they wanted to, can they share that documents?
Absolutely. But Angel, with that being said, buyers are always still encouraged to get their own survey done because landmarks move, markers move, lines get blurred, lines get confused. So when I ask the seller for a survey, I'm asking for me. And if the seller says, oh, share it with the buyer, I don't mind. Okay, but I think buyers still need to get their own done so that they know. Things change from when the sellers had theirs done. Maybe the neighbor put a shed on and now we have an encroachment. We didn't, but now we do, for example. Examples of public special assessments. Again, these are our government special assessments. So maybe they're going to install street lighting. Maybe they're going to hook a whole neighborhood up to public water or public sewer. So government special assessments, and remember we compare those to HOA special assessments, which would be a normal lien priority. Government special assessments and HOA special assessments are not the same. So public special assessments are a government. Private then are our HOAs. Where do we usually see HOAs? I mean, a subdivision, but what housing types are we always going to see an HOA?
Condo.
Condos, townhomes.
Townhouse and
Townhouse.
condos.
Yep, condos, townhomes, co-ops if you
Co-ops.
have them, timeshares, yep. Now, again, you could have a subdivision of single-family homes that have an HOA, but you're always gonna see them with your hybrid properties, condos and townhomes. And then the best definition against an encumbrance is just some kind of limitation. People buy properties every single day with encumbrances. It's my job to make sure that they know what they're buying. Remember, we talked about easements. Buyer looks at you and says, I don't want to buy anything without easements. All right, then you got to get your own water. You got to get your own power. You got to get your own internet, right? Everything practically has an easement. So we buy and sell houses every day, covenants, things like that. We buy and sell properties every day with encumbrances, with these limitations. It's just my job to make sure that they know, they are aware of their limitations. Good? Questions? Rocking and rolling. Let's talk about some government controls or some public land use controls. Our HOAs were our private land use controls. Government controls are our public land use controls. So in this section, we're going to do that. We're going to identify our public land use regulations or controls. When we talk about public land use regulations is when we start talking about zoning. So we're going to introduce you to zoning, some zoning terms, some zoning words. So government regulations, you may own fee simple absolute, but there are still some regulations on how in some cases you can use the land, which would be our zoning. Building codes are just that, they're building codes, minimum construction standards. Builders building today have certain building codes that they have to follow. Talking a little bit about subdivisions, specifically the creation of subdivisions and what developers need to have done before they can start building, before they can start clearing the land and getting it ready to build. And then we're going to talk about some environmental regulations or some environmental concerns as well. So let's first start with zoning and planning. With zoning, zoning is local in nature, which means there are no statewide zoning ordinances. There are no national zoning ordinances. Zoning is local in nature. The Enabling Act allows cities, counties, towns, municipalities, however they're divvied up, they allow, the Enabling Act allows the local government to set rules for their areas. Raleigh can't come to Winston-Salem and dictate their zoning. Winston-Salem gets to regulate their own zoning. These enabling acts, trying to provide health and safety, general welfare of the public, allowing for commercial businesses, industrial, agricultural, various zonings, and how the properties can be used. And zoning should be clear, precise, and fair. It's meant to be in the best benefit of the people that live in the zoning board. Most of our cities and towns and counties and municipalities have a long-term, it's called a master plan. When you guys were in high school, did anybody ever look at you and say, where do you see yourselves in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 20 years? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing for dinner tomorrow, not alone where I'm going to be in 10 years from now, That's kind of what the master plan, where does this city, what kind of growth do we hope to see in 20 years? And specifically, what can we do to achieve those goals? If you want to grow, then we need to get businesses. We need to get places that employ people. We need to have housing and room for housing. So these master plans kind of give our local municipalities a guide of where they want to go. And whether or not things get approved, like for example, the creation of a new subdivision. If a developer goes to the zoning board and says, hey, I want to put a subdivision in here, the first thing the zoning board is going to do is determine if it benefits, if it fits into their master plan. Does it fit into the projection where they see themselves in 20 years, for example? If it doesn't, the builder may get denied the claim to build that subdivision. So when we talk about some governmental powers, we can think of Pete. And our governmental powers, our P is going to be our police power. Governmental power, E of eminent domain. Eminent domain is the taking of the property for public good. That's the key right there. It is for public good. So maybe they need to take an area to rezone it to grow for new commercial growth, for example. You guys, I don't care where you are, Triad, Triangle, Charlotte, down at the coast, up in the mountains. North Carolina is like in the top 3 states to move to. So no matter where you are, North Carolina is growing. And you don't have to go too far to see some kind of road construction, do you? And sometimes it's like road construction after road construction after road construction. Have you guys ever seen areas where there was a 2-lane road and they decide to widen it? And now it's a 2-lane road with a median or maybe a 4-lane road? When they widen it, they have to take some of the homeowners' property so they have room to widen that road. That would be the power of eminent domain. Yep, because they can, because they're the government. That's the power that they have, that eminent domain. I mean, we got belt loops and interstates popping up. You don't have to go far. I mean, in some cases, I take a right out my place and like, boom, they're widening the road 1.5 miles away from me. You know, not mine yet, but the mile. So you don't have to go too far to see, they call it progress, to see this growth, to see this progress. Yes, ma'am, D.
And is that when they have to pay?
So they will offer just compensation, which means they will pay you for the portion of your property that you're taking.
So that
They're not
means
gonna
whatever
take it.
portion they take, you're not paying taxes on that part no longer.
Because you don't own it anymore.
Okay.
So that's a great point, Dee. I hadn't thought about that. So not only are you going to get paid for it, but that's that much less taxes. There you go. That you have to pay. Those silver linings. So eminent domain is taking the property for public good. Another power of the government, they have the power to tax us. All real property in North Carolina is subject to taxation. Now, you may have some properties that are eligible for tax exempt or a tax discount, tax break. For example, maybe a charitable property or a non-for-profit property may not pay as much taxes. They could have tax exemptions for the elderly, for example. So there could be some exceptions here and there, but everybody is subject to taxation. And then the other power of the government is to take the property escheat. If they are taking your property escheat, it means that the individual passes away, no will, no heirs. If somebody passes away without a will or without any heirs, then the government will take the property escheat. It'll fall back to the state or the county, whomever. So Pete kind of helps us know our governmental powers, what they have the power to do. And a big part of that is all around our public land use controls, which is zoning. Aren't zoning maps so pretty? Look at that. That's Greensboro. Isn't it pretty? Lots of fun colors going on in here. I know we can't see it. We don't need to. But you know, some colors represent areas that are for residential only, maybe some areas that are commercial only, maybe agricultural, maybe industrial, maybe some kind of mixed use. You go downtown, we got residential and commercial. You know, you got the retail stores and the restaurants on the first floor, and then you got apartments on floors 2 through whatever. This mixed use allows the idea of live, work, and play all downtown. Understand this, you guys, there are no uniform codes. You could look at Greensboro zoning and you could study it, and you could pass a test on it. What's that going to do to help you understanding Winston-Salem zoning? Absolutely nothing, because the Enabling Act says zoning is local in nature. As real estate agents, we are the experts of our market. And what I mean by that is I can help my buyers and sellers find and understand the zoning. I know where to go for each city or each county. I know how to get this information. I know how to help them verify. If they have questions, I can help send them to that appropriate party. Buyers and sellers come and go. Houses come and go, but the market stays the same. And understanding the market and knowing the area that you want to work, you don't have to memorize it, but you need to know where to go. You need to know where to go to find the information. One thing you guys may want to start thinking about is the area that you want to work. Truth be told, when you get your license, you're allowed to brokerage any deal as long as the property is located in the state of North Carolina. You could be a real estate agent from Murphy to Manteo. Y'all gonna know all those markets? We got 100 counties. We gonna know all those markets. We gonna be familiar with all those markets. We tend to start with where we want to work, where we want to live. Now I'm here in the Triad. I'm familiar with the Triad. I've worked the Triad. If my best friend called me and said she wanted to buy a house in Wilmington, I'm not an expert of the Wilmington market. I've been there a few times. It's a great time. I enjoy it. But what does that do in helping her buy property there? My best bet in that case would be to refer her to an agent in Wilmington that knows the market. I get a referral fee. Is something better than nothing? You better believe it. And I'm protecting her best interest by sending her to somebody that knows the markets. So being the expert of your market, deciding where you want to work, how much you want to tackle. Some of you may just want to work a city, a county. Some of you may want to take on the Triad, but just start thinking about where you want to go. So just some examples of some zoning codes. Again, don't write these down because this is just an example. But you may see zoning codes are residential or R codes, etc. 20 is the density, like how many, what's the population in this area? How big do we want it to grow? The smaller the number, the smaller the density. But this is the kind of thing that we're going to find, we're going to learn as we start learning our markets, learning these zoning codes, zoning, where to go. And guys, remember, where to go to find zoning is not what you're tested on. That's what you get when you join your firm. Remember those checklists we talked about last night? Your broker in charge is going to help you go to find, when you get that listing, when you get that buyer, they're going to help you so you know where to go to best assist your buyer. Question is, should you join a firm in an area you want to work? Ding, 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 ding. Because that firm is in your market. I'm not going to affiliate with a firm in Raleigh. I'm going to affiliate with a firm here in the Triad. So if you're thinking about what firms you want to work with, that may be another place to start. What's your market? Where do you want to work? Getting to know the market. How many of you, put zoning aside for just a second, how many of you like to go open housing on Sunday? Like to go around, look at houses, you see something open. That's a great way for you to start learning homes in your market. If you're driving around on a Sunday and you see something open, go. It's okay, even though you're not wanting to buy. That's why we have open houses, so we can have anybody come out. The nosy neighbors, they love to come to open houses. I got 5 scheduled for Saturday or Sunday. I have a feeling they're going to get canceled, but we'll see what happens tomorrow night. But whenever you're seeing an open house sign, the only thing I ask you guys is that you don't go in there acting like a super serious buyer. Please don't do that to the agent. Tell them, I'm in pre-licensing. I saw you were having your open house. I just want to look around. That's a great way for you to start learning the inventory that's in your market. Anybody like to look at pretty homes for sale on realtor.com and Zillow.com and all those other sites? There's like thousands of sites that homes are on. Start looking at homes for sale in your market and start seeing what your inventory is going to look like. Now it's going to range, right? Prices and types and styles and everything. But when we say the expert of your market, you're familiar with where that subdivision is. You're familiar with where that property is. I remember when I got into sales, I went from my admin to my sales. You know what the first thing I did was? I turned the highway off of my GPS. And that allowed me to drive around. I had to give myself a few extra minutes, right? But that allowed me to drive around and start learning the area, the market that I wanted to work. Ebony, did I see your...
You kind of answered it for me, but I would say that well, that's something that I enjoy doing too. Like I said, I DoorDash on the side a little bit and going into different areas, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was, because I'm in Winston and I live like close to like Rural Hall, so I'm just like, wow, I didn't know this was back here, or I didn't like Peace Haven, like I didn't know certain areas. I've been to High Point. I was like, wow, it's all these houses. So yeah, you're right. Thank you.
I have an agent friend, and her and her husband moved down here from New York for his job. And so she's here alone. He's at work. She's here alone. And she's like, well, what do I do? So one afternoon, she hopped in her car and just started driving. And she went and explored Winston-Salem. And at some point, she was like, I wonder if I could sell these houses. And now, fast forward, here she is. And it all started because she was just out driving around anyway. So when we talk about being the expert of your market, we need to be familiar. Now, I don't know every house up and down every street, but I'm familiar with the areas, the subdivisions, the main veins, the main streets. See, it is fun to look. And, you know, as you guys get, once you get licensed and you go out with buyers, you know, I think, let's see, what did I just met y'all a week ago, right? Have we already figured out that real estate's more than driving around looking at pretty houses all day? Right? I wish it was that easy. And guys, they're not all pretty, but there's a lot more involved than just driving around looking at pretty houses as we're learning. But that is probably one of the funner pieces of it. Y'all just always remember, you are not the one buying this house. So when you walk in the front door, what's your opinion matter? Not much. Yes, ma'am, Dee, and then we'll take a break.
I have a question. So besides looking at Zillow, Redfin, and all the other websites, I also drive around too. There's a lot of houses that's like abandoned, but when you look up the address, they're not on the market. So what does that mean? Like, is it like a foreclosed or somebody owning? They just
could be a foreclosed, could be somebody abandoned the property. Those are the ones we want to watch out for. Adverse possession in 7 or 20 years, right? But yeah, lots of abandoned properties. Could be foreclosure, could be, who knows, you know, tax liens. There you go. Could be unpaid tax liens. Who knows?
Okay.
let's go ahead and I know I'm a few minutes early, but I don't like to start a big topic and then, stop. So let's go ahead and take our break. We come back, we're going to get into some zoning terms, some zoning words. back. The cameras are coming back on. All right. So some zoning terms, some zoning words. The first zoning term we have are ETJs, are extraterritorial jurisdictions. These are areas that are not within the city limits. They are just outside the city limits, up to 3 miles outside the city limits, and they're just not big enough to have their own governmental powers. They're not big enough to have their own zoning. So while they're not in the city limits, they piggyback off of that city's zoning. If they become in the city limits, now they've been annexed and now they are in those city limits. But ETJs outside the city limits, up to 3 miles. And honestly, it depends on population. It's your rural areas, your suburbs, those smaller areas. So the police powers, depending on population, may be able to regulate how that land is used. We mentioned eminent domain a few minutes ago. Eminent domain is the power that the government has to take your property for public good. The process is called condemnation. Eminent domain is the power. The process is condemnation. It may not be for the entire property. In this case, it looks like it is. But like we said, it might be if they want to widen the road in front of your house, they're just going to take that strip of land in front of your house so they can widen the road. Now let's think about this, because we said they would offer you just compensation. They're going to pay you for the land that they take. But what they're not going to pay you for is the fact that your property may have lost value because now it's 6 feet closer to a 4-lane highway. So it might be a little harder to sell. It might be a little not as desirable as it gets closer to the busier road. Just compensation, meaning they will pay you just for the land. Every once in a while, I hear of eminent domain being fought. Maybe the homeowners come together, go downtown and try to fight it. Get you a good attorney. I don't think you win often, but there are times, there are a few times that you win. But bottom line, if the government wants to take your property for eminent domain, that's the power that they have.
Could you
This
repeat
pops
what you
up on
said
the,
at the
yeah.
beginning?
Do what?
Can you repeat what you said about it in the beginning, Emmett? You said something about
I'm recording. So if I can't get
okay.
it word for word, eminent domain is the power.
Yes.
Condemnation is the process. This pops up on the news every once in a while. Eminent domain. Somebody doesn't like the fact and they go to like 2 wants to know. Again, this usually isn't good news when you get that letter. Governmental powers. Another zoning term is called a variance. A variance is an exception. With a variance, it is one. Note that, highlight it, bold it, circle it. One homeowner. They're going to the zoning board to prove a hardship. And what we mean by this, they're going to the zoning board and saying, because of your zoning, I can't use my property in a manner that I intended. Now, this isn't for profit. This isn't because they want to. They've got to prove a true, unique hardship. And if the zoning board approves it, they have granted that one homeowner a variance. They've given them permission to break the rules. So it's a permitted deviation. It's permission to break the rules. I got an example in just a second. Again, that one homeowner has to prove a hardship. It's not just because they wanna, it's because I can't use my land any way at all because of your zoning. Give me permission to break the rules. So that hardship has to be unique just to this one property, one homeowner, for them to even consider it. It's not based on them profiting. It's based on your land isn't usable, or the land isn't usable because of the zoning. So you go to the zoning board, you say, hey, I have a variance, I have permission to break the rules. You prove your hardship. They either grant you a variance or they don't. So let's say the zoning, for example, requires a 50 feet setback from all the roads, which means the property, the structure has to be 50 feet back from the road. So in this case, they may have to grant a variance to give them permission to build, because it's hard to build a house on a creek, for example. So you're not changing the use, the public use. It's one homeowner asking to break the rules. Another term, not specific to zoning, but as it applies here, another term is an amendment. Please write this down. An amendment is a change. An amendment is a change. So specifically, a zoning amendment is a change to the current zoning code. We're going to see that word again when we start talking about contracts. So the basic word amendment is a change. So specifically a zoning amendment, you guys see these signs all over the place, right? Red signs with white Z's. Sometimes we see white signs with red Z's. Something is zoned, for example, residential, and they want to pass an amendment to make it commercial, for example. They put these notices up. The public has the opportunity to go stand in front of the zoning board and talk about why they are for or for not this change. The zoning board will consider what the public has to say. But what these signs are doing and notifying you of the upcoming meeting. So if you live in this area, you definitely would want to attend these meetings to know what's going on in your neighborhood. But if you are even working the area, if this is your market and they're proposing to change, residential to commercial, for example, then you'd want to know that that's going to be a change that could affect your market. So the process, whomever wants to make that change, it's a process. Bottom line, the zoning board either approves it or doesn't. Do I have any High Point people? Few of you. High Point, we go up Johnson Street, Skeet Club, that intersection. And there was a zoning amendment proposal on the table not too long ago to tear down. There's a historic farmhouse on the corner, and they wanted to tear it down and put in a Publix. And the people that lived around there didn't want it. You know what? This round, the people won. I don't think it's over. I think they may come back and try again. But the zoning board heard them, heard their concerns. And for right now, that idea has been squashed. I bet you as you get closer into town, I bet you if you start looking for them, you're going to start seeing them. Archdale's weird. Ours are green and yellow. I don't know why. Ours aren't red and white like everybody else's, but so different areas, different municipalities might have different, but really what you're looking for is, and again, it's just letting you know that there's a proposed zoning amendment on the table. Building codes. Building codes are construction standards The main purpose of building codes is public safety. So when a builder decides to build a house, or when a developer wants to build houses, they at a minimum have to follow these minimum building codes. They can go above and beyond, but they have to follow the minimum building codes. Building codes are statewide. So North Carolina sets their building codes. So with building codes, they're enforced or enacted. If you want to build, or if you want to do major improvements, you go to the zoning board and you request a building permit. Permits are permission to build. So you want to build a house, or maybe you want to, do major work to your home. You go to the zoning board. If your new construction project fits into their master plan, then they will issue a permit. You've been issued that permit, and you now have permission from the zoning board to build. I've always heard, anytime you're messing with structural, electrical, or plumbing, what are three really big components of a home? Structural, electrical, and plumbing. And when you're messing with those three, then you need to request a permit. Inspectors will come out throughout the process to make sure that it's being built according to building codes. So they come out and check in on builders, major projects, that kind of thing. Make sure that the structure is being built according to codes. And when it's complete, once we have the final inspection, then they will issue a certificate of occupancy, also known as a CO. The CO is issued upon the final inspection. A CO closes out a permit. A CO lets us know that this was built according to those minimum construction standards for safety. Real estate agents, you don't have to go far in your career to come across unpermitted space. Unpermitted space is when somebody makes an improvement dealing with structural, electrical, or plumbing, and they don't do it without permits. Now, some people will look you in the eye and tell you they didn't know they needed a permit. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Other people, I think, just try to get away with it. If you come across or I should say, when you come across unpermitted space, we have to disclose that that space was unpermitted. And how do I know it's unpermitted? Because I ask questions. I go down to this finished basement and I say, wow, this is nice. Did y'all do this? Oh yeah, we put this wall up and the ceiling and put flooring down. Did y'all get permits? No. Another way we can find out about unpermitted space is by looking at the tax records. The tax records aren't going to have this as square footage because they don't think that it's complete. So we're doing a little bit of research on the property before we go to the listing, try to gather some of this information. And unpermitted space isn't bad. This space could be permitted after the fact. It's not as easy to do. Let's just start tearing down walls or something to look at the electrical. But it can be permitted after the fact. What you and I need to know is when we come across it, we've got to disclose. That's what we mean by a material fact. I believe this is your first introduction to a material fact. We're going to do a deep dive on material facts in Unit 3. But a material fact is something that the broker must disclose. What am I doing if I'm disclosing? What does disclose tell us?
You're telling, let them know something.
I'm letting them know something. I'm letting them know that this basement was finished without permitted. Brokers must disclose material facts. I had an acquaintance that her and her husband bought a house. I saw the house. I was there. I was at the housewarming party. Fast forward a couple years, and she called me and said, "We want to sell the house. Do you want to come over and talk to us about listing it?" And I said, "Yeah." I saw the house when she bought it. It was a 3-bed, 1-bath. When she called me to come list it, I pulled the tax records. I did my research. I looked in the public records, the GIS. When I pulled the tax records, it said 3-bed, 1-bath. I went to the property for a potential listing, and she's giving me the grand tour. And lo and behold, there's a second bathroom. I said, "Where'd this come from?" She was like, "Well, she was so proud. We took part of the kitchen and part of the closet, and we enclosed the space, and we made a bathroom." And I was like, "That's pretty cool. Did y'all get permits?" "No, we didn't." I'm like, "Okay, how did I know that? How many bathrooms did the tax record tell me it had?" "One." "How many did I see when I was there when she bought it?" Now, I got lucky there, but still, the tax record told me 1. She said, "What do I need to do?" And I said, "Well, you could call the county, have them come out and permit it. It's not going to be as accurate, but at least somebody can put their eyes on it." She said, "Is that going to cost me money?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I don't want to. Do I have to?" "I can't make anybody do anything." And she said, "What do you do?" And I said, I can list this as a 3-bed, 2-bath. I can list it as a 2-bath, but I've got to disclose that that second bathroom is unpermitted. Some insurance policies care about this, because if it wasn't permitted, that means that the electrical wasn't inspected, the plumbing wasn't inspected, any mess with structural wasn't inspected. And if there's faulty electrical behind the new wall of the bathroom and the house burns down and the fire marshal determines that it came from that second bath that nobody knew about, I don't know if they're going to cover them. Some policies aren't as generous with unpermitted, and that's the big reason why all I need to do is disclose it. So guys, when we're with sellers, when we're walking around preparing for listing appointments, we've got to ask questions. And when I learn information, brokers will have this duty to disclose material facts. What you want to do with it, that's on you. My job is to tell you about it. Remember, I'm a fact finder. I'm gathering the information for you, my client, to make an informed decision. So much more on material facts. I'm going to start easing you in a little bit. Like I said, we're going to do a deep dive on material facts in Unit 3. So to do a side-by-side, oh, by the way, I didn't get the listing. I have a feeling it was the unpermitted thing. I know she was talking to other agents. Competitive listing appointments are a very real thing. If I don't get a listing for any reason, I will stalk that listing because I want to know who got it and for how much they listed it for. And I stalked that listing for months and nobody got it. But guess what? It sold when she moved to Florida because we're acquaintances. So I saw it go down on Facebook. So after she said it closed and she moved to Florida, I did a deep dive. And guess what? She was a for sale by owner. And you know why I think? I think because every agent that showed up said, "What's that second bathroom?" The tax record said 1. I think that's my personal opinion. But I think in the end, she said, "I'm going to go for sale by owner." So to do a nice side-by-side comparison, zoning are regulations for how we can use the land, local regulations for how we can use the land. Building codes are construction standards for minimum construction standards for safety. Building codes are statewide. Zoning is local. Questions on our building codes or zoning? Another zoning term is non-conforming use. Non-conforming use is use of a property that differs from zoning. The property is being used in a way that is different from zoning. And we got two types of non-conforming use. There's legal non-conforming use, and there's illegal non-conforming use. Legal non-conforming use is okay. Illegal non-conforming use is not. So illegal non-conforming use means that the use was in place and the homeowner went and used the property, changed the use of the property, and started using it in a different way. Apparently, this is a picture of a student apartment in a basement. So let's say you have a full furnished basement, or maybe you have a room over the detached garage, like an apartment over the detached garage. And you want to let a college student move in, for example. If the area is zoned for single family, how many families can live on that property? Yeah. So you invite a college student to move in. How many families are living on that property? 2. Unless it's like your daddy or your son or something, right? Unless they are your family. So you allow this person to move in, you've violated zoning. The use was in place. It's single family residential. The use was in place, but you allow this student to come in. You know, I think another example, somebody, you have a buyer, you're out looking at properties, and you get the buyer, they go under contract, they close, it's zoned residential only. After closing, the buyer decides to convert the garage into a hair salon where the public can come in, get their hair done. That's a commercial use, right? It's zoned residential, but they violated, they had that non-conforming use because they changed the use and allowed that commercial. Remember, zoning is part of our governmental powers. So the neighbors that are tired of all the people coming and going up the street to get their hair done all the time, their only recourse is going to be to get the government involved. Let's see, it looks like I had a couple hands. I'm not sure who was first, but Tiffany, I see you first.
What about if a person wants to do Airbnb? Sometimes people have Airbnb. What is that?
That could be a violation of zoning if zoning doesn't allow, and that's exactly what is going on right now with a lot with Airbnbs. You get violations of zonings, covenants, right? All sorts of things going on. So, you know, again, if it's an HOA thing, you contact the HOA. You complain on the HOA. If it's a zoning thing, you contact the government authority. The police are usually a good place to start, or you go to the downtown to the zoning board and say, my neighbor has an Airbnb and these guys are you know, partying all hours, and I'm tired of it. I want them out. I want them. That's the difference in a private land use control with the HOA versus a public land use control with the government, is how it's enforced. And Airbnbs are huge right now. I see I got a couple questions in the chat, but I got Dee's hand first, and then I'll get these questions in the chat.
So when I was looking at a house, right? So I told the guy, he brought us to look at a house. I said, we're looking for a 5-bedroom, but he brought us to a house and it was like, so I guess we're in city limits. It was out of city limits. And he was like, this is a 5-bedroom, but we can't list it as a 5-bedroom because of some reason, he said. And I was like,
On-site septic?
I'm not sure.
We'll talk about that, but it could be that the on-site septic. We're going to talk about that.
Oh, so that don't have nothing to do with zoning though.
No,
Oh,
because if it's outside the city limits, and if you're in an ETJ, they can regulate that. You know what I'm saying? But if it's not an ETJ, then you're going to have whatever zoning. So, you know, I think my answer to that is depends, but that's what I thought of first. It was on-site septic. So hang on to that. We'll get there. Where can I find out information about zoning? So again, your BICs are I don't want you guys worrying about this stuff right now, okay? Because your BICs will help you. But as a side note, don't waste your study time on this. But as a side note, every county has what's known as and let me just put it here so you can hear me, GIS. So if you go to your county's GIS, you can pull public records, tax records, you can learn about the zoning, all sorts of stuff about your property. So just Google your county's GIS, and that's always a great place to start. But everybody look at me. You're not spending your study time, your dedicated study time on the GIS. Head bobs? Everybody heard me? Okay. But again, this is one of these things. You call your BIC and you say, hey, I potentially have a listing appointment. Your BIC's going to jump into action and say, we need to look at this, this, and this. And this class has given us the idea of what it is that we need to look at. So non-conforming illegal use, and you may want to write this down. Non-conforming illegal use. The use or the rule was in place and they changed the use. It's zoned residential and you decided to have commercial. What about a daycare out of somebody's home? Can anybody just open up a daycare out of their home?
No.
We'll have to look at zoning. And if zoning doesn't allow it and they do it anyway, we have a non-conforming illegal use. The other non-conforming use then is a legal non-conforming use. A legal non-conforming use means that the use was in place and then they changed the rule. So it was zoned commercial and then they changed it to residential. They're not going to make the hotel shut down, for example. They're going to allow the hotel to continue operating as a legal non-conforming use. So legal, the use was in place, and then they changed the rule. You're grandfathered in. You're allowed to continue your operation because you were there first. I think one of the great examples, and we see this in many older neighborhoods, the gas station was there and then they rezoned it to residential. Have y'all ever been driving around in like this random gas station? You're like, this just doesn't look like it fits here. It doesn't look like it belongs. Once upon a time ago, it was allowed. At some point, they came and rezoned it residential. Y'all, they're not going to make the gas station owner close down. However, they're not going to allow this use to continue forever because it is a non-conforming use. So if this gas station owner sells to somebody else, the new owner probably won't be allowed to continue using it as a gas station. If the property is destroyed or they request permits for major improvements, the permits will probably be denied because it's a non-conforming use. We'll allow you to use it as is, but when you're done, it's zoned residential. Both are non-conforming. One's okay, the other one's not. The legal non-conforming use you're grandfathered in. You were there first. Questions on that?
Miss Julie,
Mhm.
you say if the person sell the property, that in this example the commercial property, the next owner can be allowed or not allowed to use?
Not. They
okay.
will not be allowed because it's a non-conforming use.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's why some of those gas stations look, I mean, sometimes like the next gust of wind is gonna take them down, you know, because they can't get permits. They're gonna hang on to it as long as they possibly can because they know this is it.
When they do improvements to the buildings.
Probably not anything that would require a permit, because the zoning board would probably, not unless you catch them in a really good mood, the zoning board would probably deny the permit because that would extend the non-conforming use. So if your gas station burns down, you're done. You want permits, you're done. Depending on zoning, depending on that zoning. Yep. Ebony?
Oh. Hey, what about like with all the businesses like Big Lots, for example, with them closing? Now, when somebody, I guess the new landlord might buy that building and whatnot, will they still have to go through the same process, like for the permits and the building inspecting and whatnot, even though it used to be a Big Lot? So, but if they wanted to change it into like a event space,
If they want to change it, then they may have to, depending on what the zoning, what it's zoned for. You can
okay,
take commercial use and use it as a commercial use because the zoning is commercial.
okay, okay. So that's what I'm trying to, okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Savannah. I mean, sometimes those gas stations, because we got gas tanks underneath and we don't want those things to leak. So there's other things going on with gas stations, of course. Getting into some environmental things that we're going to touch on. Another zoning term is a special use permit, also known as a conditional use permit. This allows the property to be used in a way that's different than the surrounding zoning. This is what allows hospitals in a residential area, libraries, churches, schools, museums. Where are my Winston people? Y'all know Ardmore? Check out Ardmore. You got a hospital, you got a school, you got a park, you got all sorts of things that aren't residential. Because having this special use permit, having that hospital there, having Ardmore Baptist Church, having the various amenities of Ardmore benefits the public. And they're there because of a special use permits. They have special permission to be there. So special purpose properties because it benefits the hospitals. I'm sorry, because it benefits the public, not the hospital. It benefits the, sorry, public. Another zoning term, we're learning all sorts of words tonight, aren't we? Another zoning term is an overlay district. This is when you have multiple zoning districts kind of overlaid, laying on top of each other. It might be that you have a flood zone zoning on top of a residential zoning. So you got to follow the residential, you got to follow the flood zone, and the property may be limited because you don't now have to follow one zoning, you have to follow two. I think the best example of an overlay district is a historic district in a residential area. It's residential, it's zoned residential, but it's also zoned historic. Most cities have some kind of historic district. And so you got layers. You have several different zoning districts for that homeowner to abide. Speaking of historic district, another zoning term we have is our historic preservations. This is Old Salem. Old Salem is zoned residential, it's zoned commercial. Did y'all know people lived in Old Salem? It's zoned commercial, and guess what? It's also zoned historic district. The people that live in Old Salem, per the historic district, have to keep the exterior of their home looking like Old Salem. Now, if you ever get the opportunity to walk inside of a home in Old Salem, for example, or anywhere, it's like walking through time. Because inside they're nice, they're modern. They don't regulate inside, they just regulate the exterior because we got to keep Old Salem looking like Old Salem. Could y'all imagine if they put up like pink vinyl in Old Salem or something? I mean, the chaos, you know, because they didn't have vinyl. They didn't have vinyl when Old Salem was around. So anytime people that live in a historic district want to do improvements to the exterior, they have to get permission from the zoning board. They have to get permission. And you know that when you move in, by the way, before you buy this house in Old Salem, they say you do whatever you want to inside. It's incredible. It's like walking through time. It's incredible. But they may have regulations on, you know, the material, the colors, whatever they were using back in the day. Another zoning term is our spot zoning. This is when we're going to take one or more properties and rezone it to allow a different use. So maybe you have a cul-de-sac, for example, or a dead-end street. Maybe a vacant piece of land. Nobody's built on it. Zoned residential, nobody's built on it. And the neighbors come together and get the great idea to get it spot zoned or rezoned for a playground. Now it's for the public's best interest. A true legal spot zoning is for the public's best interest, which means anybody can come play in that playground, not just the people that live in that neighborhood. If it only benefits the property owners, the people that live nearby, then that's an illegal spot zoning. Yeah, Ebony?
Does spot zoning have to do with like if you want to build like a retirement home for like the elderly? Like, is that dealing with spot zoning as well?
I would put that under special use.
Special use? Okay.
But to your point, Ebony, that would probably have to be a different zoning than the rest of, unless it's, you know, in a, I mean, that's like commercial residential, right? You got like several different things because you got people that live there, but you also got people that work there. It's a place of business, you know? So that would have to be that would be a special use. Another zoning term is aesthetic zoning. This is for appearances. This is keeping things pretty. I've heard, this is downtown Kernersville. Do I have any K Vegas people? And I've heard, and kind of looking at this picture, I think we could agree, don't hold me to this, but I've heard that commercial businesses in downtown commercial, the building, the exterior needs to be brick. That's their aesthetic zoning. Some places may have aesthetic zoning. They may have a sign height limit that says any of their signs can't be above so many feet, trying to keep the big blue, beautiful sky. Cemeteries would be special zoning. So if there is an area with aesthetic zoning before you build, you would need to make sure that you are in compliance with that zoning. I'm seeing New Bern does that, G-Borough, Greensboro. That's interesting. Somebody says Greensboro has required all places to have outdoor seating. I like that. Not this time of year, but I like that when it warms up. It could be aesthetic zoning requires a fence around a junkyard, for example, so we don't have to look at it. trying to keep things looking pretty. Like I said, commercial signs not over a certain height. Y'all know what, you know, any town USA looks like with our golden arches and Burger King and Walgreens and all of our signs anywhere you go, right? If they put a height limit on it, those signs aren't so high up and you can still see our big open sky. Another zoning term, I told you this would be fun, is a buffer zone. Buffer zones are just protected areas meant to separate two zoning types. So what we're looking at here is a protected area, a tree save that separates the residential from, I can't quite tell if this is commercial or industrial, but it separates the residential from the non-residential. And so you have this buffer zone here. So the residential people aren't looking directly at the eyesore across the street. So it buffer zone. Ebony, is that a new hand or?
What zone will be like considered like that one high school or one like elementary and one Walgreens and one, you know, like they have like one of everything, you know, like everybody know each other in a small little community, like Walnut Cove or something like that, or in like areas
Could
like
be-
that.
Could be special use, could be mixed
Okay.
use, could be a PUD. We talked about a PUD last night.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Ebony, these are great questions, and these are the things that we're going to look at our local
Okay.
zoning. And because what Greensboro calls mixed use, Winston might call special use.
Okay.
So it could vary because they're all local in nature.
Okay.
And that's why we need to know where to go to find out for this area.
Okay.
Or
Thank
we
you.
will, let me rephrase that. We will need to go. You don't need to know right now. But we will need to go to know where to find out this information. Another zoning term is a cluster zone. With cluster zones, think of our cul-de-sacs. By allowing a cul-de-sac, you can kind of open the lots a little bit more. With a cul-de-sac, you could get more properties at the end versus a dead-end street. At least one more property in this case. But it just designs, the cul-de-sac just allows for more open space, more natural resources. And with the cluster zoning, that would be your cul-de-sacs. Less cost for like roads and utilities. We can get more homes in this circle, this end. A basic understanding of these zoning terms. If you guys get a test question, it's going to give you a scenario and it's going to ask you which zoning term applies, A, B, C, or D. So a basic understanding of the terms. These might be good candidates for flashcards. We don't need to do a deep dive on them. But having a basic understanding. So when you're asked a scenario, buyer wants to buy in a historic district, what type of zoning do they need? You know, that kind of thing. We have a basic understanding, A, B, C, or D. Hey, Ebony.
Hey, okay, so if the government does like eminent domain because they want to build a store or something on your land, could you request a buffer zone?
You could.
Okay.
I don't know where it's going to get you, but you absolutely could. Yeah, we go downtown and say, look, if y'all got to do this, can you give me some kind of, you know, and they may consider it, you know, but yeah, you could.
Okay.
So this urban and regional use planning, this is kind of getting us back to our master plan, an area's master plan. If we're talking about an urban area, we're looking downtown. Rural, we're out in the country. So you're going to have different zonings depending on, you know, density, population. Again, it's all local. So the municipality, the city. I think we can, you know, we talk about this master plan. I mean, I look at Winston. I look at High Point. If you're familiar with downtown Winston, downtown High Point, how much have they changed in the last 10 years, 15 years? Do y'all know downtown Winston-Salem before and after? I mean, we had all those old RJR tobacco warehouses that were just falling apart. And then somebody came in and wanted to develop them, but before they could develop them, they had to get them rezoned. They had to get them rezoned from industrial to residential and commercial. And once that was passed, then they were able to take those old RJR warehouses and convert them into nice condos and apartments. I mean, nice condos and apartments. And because they brought those people in, look at how downtown Winston-Salem has just exploded. Same thing with High Point. We're taking those old furniture manufacturing buildings and we're turning them into apartments and commercial places of businesses and that kind of thing. So by approving something to be rezoned, for example, from industrial to residential, it can really help the downtown. Lexington's doing it. I mean, this is the growth. This is the progress. And guys, like I said, for the last couple years, North Carolina has been in at least the top 5, if not the top 3 of places that people are moving to. So we gotta be flexible. And that's the thing to understand about zoning. It's got to be flexible to allow for this growth, allow for this expansion. I heard, I can't tell you how long ago, but when downtown Winston-Salem didn't look like it does now, I mean, I heard the mayor of Winston-Salem once say that before it was rezoned, you could fire a cannon down 4th Street after 5 p.m. and not hit a soul. Have y'all tried to drive down 4th Street lately? You can't, it's hard not to hit somebody driving down 4th Street, not alone fire a cannon. And it's all because they changed that zoning. They allowed these developers to come in and change these zonings. And now we got a booming downtown area. What's going to happen to Winston tomorrow? Who knows? Because zoning is flexible. It's got to be flexible to allow for growth, to allow for change. Maybe log out and log back in. So when it comes to zoning, what's this mean for us? And guys, this is the first topic that we got into that really is about us. So when it comes to zoning, as we said, I need to be the expert in my market. I don't have zoning memorized. Ask me the zoning of a subdivision or an area in Greensboro, and I can't just spit it out. However, I know where to go. I know where to find that information. So if I want to list a home here, I know where to go. If I want to help a buyer buy a home here, I know where to go. When I say being the expert of my market, I know my resources. I know my tools. I know how to get this information. So as a broker, specifically when it comes to zoning, a couple things that we need to make sure that we do is, first off, never misrepresent information. If you misrepresent something, you've put out false information. So what I'm telling you is, don't promote it or advertise it until you've looked it up, until you've seen it, until you know what it is. Don't guess. Don't think you know. Don't base it on the neighbors. You go find out and make sure that what you're putting out there to the public is accurate. I also need to be on the lookout for potential issues. we're going to start talking about red flags. And red flags are alerting me to the fact that something needs to be investigated, something needs to be researched. And we need to know when to stay in our lane. I can help you get the zoning information, but I can't interpret it for you. Interpreting legal documents, what's that word legal tell you? That's going to be the attorneys. I can help you gather the information. Remember, I'm a fact finder. And I can help you gather the information, but when the buyer starts, well, what's this mean? And can I do? We need to get them to their attorney, or we need to get them to the zoning board. Remember, if it's important to my buyer, it's important to me. So your buyer's buying and they tell you, I want to buy property to be able to convert my garage into a hair salon. If it's important to them, it's now important to me, which means I have a duty to go above and beyond and ensure that when they buy, they can convert their garage into a hair salon without violating zoning, without violating covenants. I'm going to help them get that information so they can make an informed decision. I'm going to help point them in the right direction. So when we talk about these red flags, we're starting to introduce you to these ideas of red flags. And when your little red flag goes up, what that's do is telling you to stop, ask questions, investigate, help them find the answer. We mentioned material facts a few minutes ago. Maybe a little premature, but maybe not. My duty with material facts is to discover and disclose. Find the information out and then tell the people what I know. I do not diagnose. So I'm going to help them gather that information. Never look at a buyer and say, oh, I'm sure you can put a fence here, it's fine. I'm sure you can convert your garage into a hair salon, don't worry about it. We got to take those extra steps to help them know what they can and can't do. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's why they hire us. You guys know buyers and sellers don't have to hire us. You buy and sell houses every day without us. I need to bring something to the table that they don't have. And what I have is I'm the expert of my market, my knowledge, my resources. I can point you in the right direction. That's part of what I do to bring value to the transaction. Does that make sense? I do a lot more than go around and look at pretty houses all day. Ebony, is that a new one? One more. Okay.
I wanted to know, like, I'm also a CNA, and my this one of my old clients I had, she lived in the Lake Jeanette area, and like I loved that area, and she said that it used to be before they built the 840 highway, it was nothing but woods, and she was 95, so she's been there since I guess back in old Salem town, so it's. Will that be considered like, I guess, from the city to replace to build like the new highway, or is that like more like the
It's probably
rezone?
an NCDOT thing, probably, because it'd be a state highway.
Did they have to ask like her and I guess the
Eminent
neighbors there?
domain.
Eminent
They want to
domain.
take your
Okay.
property to build a highway.
Okay. Okay. Because when she said it was nothing but woods, that's why I was like, wow.
Somebody owned those woods.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So guys, again, I help them find the information, but hear me, I can't interpret things for them. When they start asking a lot of questions, that's when we need to know we're getting out of our lane. That's when we need to know to refer them to. I'm going to help them find the information. I'm going to help them discover and disclose, but I cannot diagnose. I can point them in the right direction so they can learn more about it. So very briefly, introduction to material facts. We're going to start talking more about this material facts until we do the deep dive in Unit 3. But I do think, you know, talking about zoning, talking about being the experts of our market, knowing the neighborhoods that we want to work, being familiar with the areas. This is really a week later. This is really the first start of being a broker that we're talking about in this class. Are we happy to be here? We're starting to learn more and more about being a broker and what my responsibilities are. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the creation of subdivisions. I think, yep, this is our last break too. So let's take 10. How we doing for the last hour? I see some hot beverages. I got me some tea too, because it's like a hot tea kind of night, isn't it? Hot tea kind of weekend. Well, coffee in the morning, and then you switch over to tea and whatever your caffeine cutoff is. All right, let's see. Cameras. Welcome back. So I'm going to take attendance. Chad, you're in. I got you. So red flags. Again, and all I'm doing when I'm looking for red flags is alerting me to things that I need to tell my clients and let them know, hey, we need to look into this. We need to talk to the expert. We need to get you some more information. So being the expert, when I say the expert of our market, I mean, it's not just the homes, the inventory of the homes. It's, you know, you guys are going to start building your I don't know, I guess for lack of a better term, you're going to start building your village and having your people. You know, you're going to have a home inspector you can go to, and you're going to have, you know, a preferred attorney and a lender and people that are there to assist you in the transaction. So you guys get licensed and you start getting out there and you're going to start meeting these people and building your village to get through this transaction. Because I don't work alone. I work with the help of the people, of the experts of their industry. And together we can all help our buyers and sellers. Yeah, a lot of times these people will go to your local board of association meetings because they want to meet you too, because you bring them business, you know. So let me tell y'all something. There's nothing more, not much more valuable than having a home inspector on speed dial that you can ask a quick question to. But you know what? That's two ways. We need to recommend, refer business to him, right? And it all works. It all works together. So if you have people in your tool belt, start, you know, being nice to them so you can utilize their resources when you're licensed. But if you don't, it's okay. You will meet people. They'll come to your board. They like to come to your office and bring you donuts. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but if you like donuts, you're coming into a fantastic business. I guess nothing says I love you like a box of donuts, you know. I thought that was so cool at first, but I'm a little over donuts. Like bring me a bagel or a taco or something, you know. But you get it, right? They're going to come in because they want you to meet you, and so you think of them. Yep, I bet. I guess any sales. I would think any sales industry. Yep. And that's what we are. We're a sales industry. All right. The next little section, we're going to talk about subdivisions, not so much HOAs or anything like that, but more specifically about how subdivisions are created. So we're still in that public land use control section. As we kind of mentioned earlier, when a developer decides that they want to create a subdivision, the first thing they need to do, or one of the first things that they need to do, is go downtown to the zoning board and get permission. And one of the first questions the zoning board is going to ask is, does this person's subdivision fit into our master plan? Does this allow for where we see ourselves in 20 years, the growth that we want within 20 years? So when we're talking about subdivisions, we're talking about the creation of subdivisions. And also with subdivisions come streets and roads. Maybe we have existing streets. Maybe the developer needs to build new streets. There's a whole lot of work that goes into the creation of a subdivision before you and I ever see the equipment show up and actually start working. I mean, sometimes it could take years to plan to be able for this developer to begin this subdivision. So it doesn't happen overnight. It is a process. But first off, it's just the basic definition of a subdivision. It is the division of land into two or more lots. So we're going to take a parcel of land and we're going to divide it. We're going to subdivide it into multiple lots for the intent of building. And we tend to, y'all, this class is heavy residential, but remember this could apply to commercial too, because you could have office parks, things like that that would fall under a commercial subdivision. And both would have to follow that same general understanding. So one of the very first things, one of the very first places that the developer starts with is with the zoning board, with the local government. If the zoning board says no, then they're not out much. But hopefully they can get it approved. Can be in different estates, 2 different estates. Thank you, Haley. 1 subdivision in 2 different estates. I'm not sure about that, Evelyn. Maybe some clarification on that question. I think she might be typing. So while she's typing, again, multiple regulations to consider before subdividing the land. Streets are a really big deal. Streets are a really, really big deal. We're going to talk more about streets. Other things to consider, other things that the zoning board specifically may want to know more about, the size of the lots. Some zoning areas say the lots have to be, they can't be any smaller than, I'm making numbers up, but they can't be any smaller than a quarter acre. Maybe they require certain setback restrictions. You have to build back so far from the road. Another thing to consider is we got to get utilities to these brand new subdivisions. We got to get plumbing. We got to get internet, especially if you're taking raw land. Can we hook up to public water, public sewer? Or are we looking at well? Are we looking at private sewer? Drainage. It's all got to be taken into consideration. So there's a lot that goes into it before you and I ever start seeing the first piece of equipment show up to actually clear it, develop it, and build it. When it comes to the creation of subdivisions, the developer at the beginning, at the early stages, they will have a preliminary map, a preliminary approval. Preliminary is not the final. This is kind of a work in progress as this subdivision is being created. We can list lots or properties for sale under preliminary approval. We can put a buyer under contract under preliminary approval. But the developer has to have the final approval, the final plat map, before I can sell the first unit, before the very first unit in that subdivision closes. All that preliminary has to be finalized. So you can put a buyer under contract under the preliminary, which means changes could still happen. Again, this is a work in progress. So changes can still happen. So you have a buyer under contract and the developer changes the plat map or changes the preliminary approval. The buyer has the opportunity to back out. They should be able to rescind their contract. You can't make them commit to something and then change it. Does that make sense? So we're under contract with a preliminary, but before the first unit in that subdivision can close, we got to have the final. And final approvals, final plat maps, that can all be found in public records. So brokers, how do we know if we have final approval? GIS, we're going to start with our public records search. And if you don't see it, then you know your buyer can't close. And you tell your buyer, changes could happen, but you don't have to take the changes. You don't have to accept the changes. Okay, so I got clarification. Thank you. So Can there be, I see. So can there be one subdivision in two different states or counties? I'm gonna say sure, depending on if we get approval from all. I mean, how is that regulated? How is that zoning? I mean, y'all, the state line, the county line's got to go somewhere, right? And you get some parts of the state that one side of the street is North Carolina and then across the street is South Carolina, you know, so they'll have to work together with that area, that subdivision. Is that, there she is. That's what happened. She had that subdivision, that preliminary. So again, what we need to understand is you can't close, your buyer can't close until everything is final. We work with, my team works with several builders, and several years ago we got a new subdivision, and I don't really know, I wasn't involved in that piece of the process, so I don't know what happened, but I just remember from my coworkers that there were a lot of changes. It's like they kept making changes, and I don't know what the issues were, but to make sure anybody touched what we currently have, I mean, y'all, they had like preliminary, it was like in font 72 purple. I mean, it was very clear that this wasn't the final. So anybody that touched it knew there could be subject to changes. We listed lots, we started building. We might have even had a buyer under contract, but you can't close on it until it's final. And the best way for us to know that it's final is to see it in the public records, find that public records. So what do you think? Can I sell lots in an unapproved subdivision? Unapproved meaning they just started building without permission from the zoning board, permission from the local municipalities. Can I sell that lot? No.
No.
Absolutely not. So we want to make sure that we have that final approval. Talking to the builders, knowing the builder, not knowing them, but talking to the builders, being involved with your buyers in the process. Guys, remember, and I think this came up earlier this week, that broker that you are talking to on behalf of the builder, they represent the builder. So whose best interest do they have? Not your buyer. So when your buyer wants to go talk to that builder, let's go with them and hear what they have to say. And let's hear if we don't have, see if we don't have any red flags pop up. We can ask questions on behalf of our buyer, because I promise you, we're more versed and experienced in this than they are. So when we start representing buyers specifically in a subdivision area, going with them and talking with them to the builders and asking the questions and making sure that all this, if it's not approved, you don't have a preliminary, you don't have a final. I mean, you have nothing. And if you're not finding anything, red flags are going up all over the place before we allow our buyer to continue. So it's a big process. And again, I mean, new construction is everywhere. Does anybody live? Am I the only one that lives in Archdale, or does anybody live down here in Archdale with me? If y'all didn't know High Point had a little suburb, now you do, and it's Archdale. And man, we got I don't know where all these people are getting ready to go, because we got subdivisions, apartment complexes, stuff just popping up all over the place down here. I guess High Point's getting too big, so now everybody's going, hey, look, there's Archdale. I just found out we're getting a Whataburger. I'm excited about that. I don't know when, but it's happening in Archdale. All right. Yes. Yeah, a lot of areas. Like I said, people are flocking to North Carolina. It's more affordable than many other states. Most of the time, our weather is good. It's not too hot. Most of the time, it's not too cold. I mean, it's just a very, people are learning, a very good place to be. I mean, if you're smack dab in the middle, we're what, 3-4 hours away from the coast. We're 2-3 hours away from the mountains. I mean, we got the best of all worlds right here in our great state. So it's a great place to be, and it's really something to see all the changes that we've been seeing in the last 5, 10, 15 years. Yes, ma'am, Ebony.
Yeah, the like when I moved to North Carolina from New York, I came here after 9/11, and I never like smelled fresh air before. So when I came to visit, I was like, oh, we gotta move to North Carolina, and I've been here for 20 years. So
Were you like,
it's
what's that smell?
yeah, no, it's fresh air, and I never seen the birds chirping and the pretty birds and the. So it was so amazing, and I just stayed, and I love it. I moved to Charlotte. We moved to Charlotte, and yeah, so it's. I love it. I ain't going nowhere. I'm definitely not moving back to New York. I mean, I miss the food and the shopping, but we have enough food and shopping now here in North Carolina. So
Yep, the great state we're in. So with subdivision comes streets. Again, it depends on, are we starting with raw land or are we taking something that's existing and building onto it? Either way, with the creation of subdivisions comes streets, and streets are either public or private. Now, when we talk about public or private, I'm not telling you if you can drive on it or not. When we talk about public or private, I'm telling you who maintains it. Public streets are maintained by the Department of Transportation, DOT. So when there's a pothole Saturday when we start snow removal, DOT, maybe North Carolina, maybe county, maybe even state, is going to be responsible for public streets. Private streets are maintained by the homeowners that live on that street. Maybe they pay HOA dues. Maybe they have a special assessment whenever there's a pothole and they need to fix it. So public versus private tells us who maintains it. Y'all, I cannot look at a street and tell you if it's publicly maintained or privately maintained. So we got to do some more research. We're doing a whole lot of research, you guys, before I list it, before my buyer buys, helping them get this information. So we're going to do some research and help them determine specifically, I mean, all subdivisions, but specifically for new subdivisions. So with the streets, the developer dedicates the street to NCDOT as either public or private. They dedicate the street as public or private. If they dedicate the street as public, DOT has not agreed to take on the responsibility of maintaining that road yet. DOT will allow the developer to dedicate it, but they will not accept that responsibility until DOT has given final approval. DOT requires developers to build their roads in a certain way using certain materials. Let's think about this. DOT is going to say, if you want me to maintain it, then I'm going to tell you how you need to build it. And if the builder doesn't build it according to DOT standards, then they're not going to accept the responsibility. So acceptance for public streets doesn't come until later. I'm going to talk about that in a second. If DOT doesn't accept, it's been dedicated as public, but the builder didn't follow their rules, DOT doesn't accept it, that means those streets will be private. Have you guys ever, I'm sure you've seen a new subdivision being built, maybe you even drove past that around in there. Once they kind of lay out the streets, they come in and they put the first layer of concrete down so they can get their big, heavy equipment in and out to build a house. We don't want it on dirt because if it rains, they're going to sink, right? So we need a layer of pavement, a layer of concrete, so the machines can come in and out and build the houses. If you go into a brand new subdivision and you look at the streets, oftentimes you see like space in the curb. It looks like the manhole covers are raised because we don't have the final layer down yet. The developer will put down the final layer of concrete once all their big, heavy equipment is out of there, once they're done building. Then they put down the final layer. Then DOT comes in and decides if they will accept responsibility. Buyer's agents. If you're helping your buyer build in a buy in a subdivision and we don't have acceptance yet, we need to make sure that they help them understand that they've been dedicated public, but I can't guarantee that nobody can guarantee that DOT will accept it until that builder is done building, until all that equipment is out of there. So the first person to buy in the subdivision, the seventh person, right? They run some risk, right? You hope it's going to be public, but if DOT doesn't accept it, then they're going to be private, which just means that the homeowners take on that responsibility. This is something in real estate that's gotten really big, really fast, because there were subdivisions built in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, where this wasn't a big deal, they thought. And everybody was telling buyers, oh, DOT will do maintenance, don't worry about it. But DOT didn't accept responsibility. And now fast forward 30, 40 years, and those roads have potholes. And the homeowners are calling DOT going, why aren't y'all fixing this? And DOT saying, not our road. So there's some risk. Let's just go ahead and put this out there. There is risk when you buy a house, period. There's risk when you buy a house in a subdivision because we don't know, a new subdivision, because we don't know that DOT is going to accept that responsibility yet. One of those builders we worked with, they started clearing land in 2018. And it's amazing to me that I remember that. But 2018 was the year, especially in this area, that we had like 2 hurricanes come through. We had like Michael, and I think the other one was Floyd. Maybe, don't hold me that. But we had like record-breaking rain in 2018. Construction and our subdivision was delayed because the dirt was too wet to put down the first layer of concrete. We couldn't get the equipment in there to build because they couldn't put the first layer down because it was too wet. My builder could have said, well, we're just going to do it anyway, but then DOT wouldn't have accepted those roads. And y'all, they come and check on their road regularly. They are very involved in the road building process. I mean, I remember at one point I looked at my coworkers and I said, y'all really are telling me that our only holdup right now is we're waiting on dirt to dry? They were like, yeah. So things like that, obviously new construction, weather, you can expect delays, it's going to happen. But we had to do it according to DOT standards if we wanted them to accept that responsibility. And nothing is guaranteed until it's done, until it's built, and the rest of that equipment is out of there. Once they come in or once they go, the developer goes and they're out. One of the last things they do is put down the final layer of concrete. DOT comes in and accepts it or not. We just need to make sure that we are disclosing this to our buyers. This should be conversation that the builders are having, which is another good reason why I need to be there to ask questions about the streets to make sure that my buyers get that information. And nobody can give a guarantee until it's done. D.
So if DOT is not, because I'm in a new subdivision and they just put our second layer of concrete down. But now I'm sitting here thinking like, do it belong to DOT or is it, because we have HOA, or is it HOA?
You're going to want to contact the HOA. Oftentimes, public roads may have private roads may have a private road agreement. So I think, HOA would be a great place to start.
Okay.
But yeah, I could look at you and say, they hope it'll be public. I need you guys to be careful once you get licensed, well, anytime. Be careful throwing around that word guarantee. Be very careful throwing that word around. I hope it'll be accepted. That's what we're all shooting for. But I can't guarantee anything until they finish. And guys, sometimes subdivisions, especially bigger ones, they might be constructed in phases. So they kind of start at the back and build their way out, you know, so phase 1, phase 2, they would be approved per phase, for example. Questions on the roads, dedicated versus accepted, public versus private.
So the public is DOT and private is you on your own.
The homeowners, yep. We're all gonna be responsible for the maintenance. The road disclosures, there's that material fact again. They should be in writing. Again, which is why I say start with the HOA. Another resource you guys are gonna have, don't worry about it now, but another resource you're gonna have, DOT has a website. And you can go to DOT's website when you're not studying, and you can look at proposed construction, planned construction, current construction. They're very forthcoming about what they're doing with their roads across the state. Some lenders require a private road disclosure if it's private, but not all lenders. That would be a certain criteria. But for the most part, we're just trying to get the information to the buyer so they can make a decision. Like I said, there's risks when you buy real estate. There's risks when you buy new construction and subdivision. There's risks when you buy a home and it's been around for 100 years. There's just risks involved. So a road becomes public because DOT accepts responsibility, but they're not going to accept it until it is complete. Private road maintenance is maintained by the homeowners, the people that live there. Maybe they hire somebody, maybe one of the guys has a trailer and he says, I can fix it. They are going to be responsible for it. Questions on our streets? Guys, brace yourself. I'm getting ready to tell you something. Everybody ready? There is no such thing as a perfect home. What? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Humans build these things. Do humans make mistake on occasion every once in a while? Yeah. I mean, even a brand new construction, they just put the doorknobs on. There's no such thing as a perfect home. It doesn't exist. So let's help our buyers and sellers find the imperfections, the character. How about we call it that? Highways. I think we were asked about highways. We got them all over the place. We got the, I think it's the 856 up in Lake Jeanette. Man, the Triad area, we got a belt loop coming. Goodness, how long have they been planning this thing, talking about this thing? I showed up on the scene in the Triad in 2000, and they were talking about that belt loop. We're starting to see it now. It's happening. If the government wants to build a highway, build a new access, then they could do so by eminent domain. They could take the property. Yeah, and just depending on the land, NCDOT may tell the builder where to go or where they need them to build, or go left instead of right, whatever. But it's all part of the planning process. And remember, eminent domain is the process. I'm sorry, eminent domain is the right, the governmental right. Condemnation is the process. Some areas, the further east we go, we could be looking at wetlands, dealing with wetlands. This is when your surface is water or close to water. Wetlands are pretty protected. not meant to protect our natural resources, our wildlife. Oftentimes, not saying you won't, but oftentimes they may not allow you to build on a wetland. If you do, you got to have stilts, right? I mean, because you're very much building in the pond, in the lake. So another reason why they're regulated. Not in a wetland, but if a property is in a flood zone, then the lender may require flood insurance. I'm going to tell you something right now. Flood insurance is not cheap at all. So if you're helping a buyer buy and they are maxed out on their allowable payment, a property with flood insurance could put them over that allowable payment, which means they're not going to get loan approval. So being aware of flood zone areas. There are flood zone maps that you and I can look at. But I can also look for areas that might be prone to flooding. How can I look at it? Is there a creek or a river or a stream nearby? Y'all know these good summer storms we get. Our creeks turn to streams sometimes, our streams turn to rivers, our rivers turn to these big gushing bodies of water. If we see a body of water, then our little red flag just went up, and we know that we need to go look at a flood zone map. And if we think it's in a flood zone, alert our buyer. I'm not telling you it is. I'm just saying that the map says that it is. And I don't want to put my buyer in a position, like I said, if they're about maxed out, and then we find out they have to get flood insurance, there's a really good chance they're not going to get loan approval. A lot to think about, a lot to help our buyer learn while they're deciding if they want to buy or not. Yeah, Dee.
Can an insurance agent tell you that you don't need flood insurance? Like there haven't been a flood in 110 years there, I wouldn't recommend you getting it.
Just because it's in a flood zone doesn't necessarily mean that flood insurance is required. It's going to depend on where the structure is located in relation to the body of water, the elevation. You know, there's a lot that goes into that algorithm to figure out. All
Gotcha.
I'm doing is alerting my buyer to the fact it's in a flood zone. You may have to have flood insurance. The surveyor can help us determine if it, you know, the lender may require the survey to help us determine the risk of that property. So kind of wrapping this up, talking again about us, disclose, disclose, disclose. Y'all do not get tired of me saying that word, because you know what? We're officially starting and we're going to say disclose a lot. I got to disclose zoning. I got to disclose any covenants, any restrictions. Seller's agents. I have to check the zoning, verify the zoning before I can list the property for sale. The program that we put our listings in is called the Multiple Listing Services, or we like to call it the MLS. And when I put a new listing into the MLS, there are required fields. And one of those required fields is zoning, which means I need to verify it. I need to look it up. Don't look at the seller and say, what's your zoning? They don't know. They don't know. So again, we're back to our resources. We're back to know where to go so we can properly advertise and represent that property. Buyer's agents, for the most part, you should be able to rely what's in MLS. If the seller says this is the zoning, then you should be able to rely on that, unless your little red flag goes up and now I'm going to verify it for my buyer. Or if my buyer has a very specific use, such as I want to convert my garage into a hair salon, my little red flag went up, and as the buyer's agent, I'm going to verify that zoning, I'm not going to rely on MLS. I now know of a very specific use, and I'm going to make sure that the zoning will allow for my buyer's specific use. Remember, if it's important to them, then it's important to me. Can I help them if they don't share that with me? No, but I can ask questions. I can try to find out. And when I do hear of a specific use, then I have a duty to make sure zoning and covenants. If they want to buy a home in a subdivision and convert the garage into a hair salon, I now got to help them with zoning and covenants, making sure that both will allow the use. Kevon, that's a great question. And that's where we're heading next week. So hang on to that one for me. We're going to help our buyers get their hands on any HOA documents if they're in a subdivision. So advise. Remember, you guys, I can help them get it. I can provide them the forms, but I cannot interpret. So when they start asking me a lot of questions about what does this mean, we're going to get them to the source. We're either going to get them to the HOA, or we're going to get them to an attorney. I think we got spotty internet connections tonight. Night classes are hard because everybody's home. All the kids are on a device, you know, so we also, you guys, the big responsibility, the big thing that I want us to hear from this section is we got to be looking out for those red flags, things that might alert me to the fact that we need to ask questions, gather more information, do some research. I can't hide my head in the sand and be like, well, everything's okay on zoning, no problems. We need to help the buyers investigate. They don't know where to go. This is why they have us. This is why they have me to help them get that information. So let's see, if I am a seller's agent, can I rely on a buyer's agent answering any? If I'm a seller's agent, can I rely on a buyer's agent answering any of my questions? I guess I'm not, maybe a specific. Okay. Answer you gave, to you. Yeah, I mean, okay, so now we're getting questions about insurance companies with all those wildfires going on in California. I mean, I don't know why insurance companies, I mean, y'all think about our state earlier this year with Helene, and I don't think that insurance companies did what we thought they were going to do. That's I can't answer for the insurance companies. I can't answer for the policies. There's a lot of heartache going on right now, and it's tough to watch. It's tough to see, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, why aren't they covering? You know, I can't answer that. It's the hardship. So looking out for these red flags, looking for signs. By the way, I'll tell you something that's come from Helene. Now that there was flooding, insurance companies want verification that it was properly addressed. You know, when you have flooding, you tend to run into issues. Now you got problems with mold, you know, things like that. So it's not just a matter of saying, you know, insurance companies may require certain steps, certain things to continue coverage or to, you know, approve coverage for the next homeowner, any signs of flooding. So, you know, anytime we have things like these, like Helene and the wildfires and things like that, you're going to have less than desirable outcomes. And I guess that's the unfortunate piece of it. And it's a shame. It's a shame. Let's see. So in Asheville, they're pretty much tearing down all the buildings and the homes that were flooded. Probably maybe past, I hate to say repair, but past repair acceptable by the insurance companies kind of thing. So sometimes, you know, tear it down and start from scratch. Yeah, Yeah, lots of heartache. So let's finish up this little section. Let's see, what do you guys think? When can a developer begin to offer lots for sale in a subdivision? Lots for sale.
Preliminary
When the
approval.
With the
final
preliminary,
plat
I-
was approved?
Preliminary.
No.
Not the final,
preliminary.
the preliminary. I can
Mm.
advertise properties for sale on the preliminary. I can put a buyer under contract with the preliminary. I can't close until we have final. And remember, if there's a change made to the preliminary, then the builder or the developer's got to give the buyer an out. They can't like lock them in, you know, like, well, you signed this and I changed my mind. So now you got to agree to my new terms. They've got to allow the buyer that out if they're not agreeable to whatever changes from the preliminary.
When you say they have an out, even their earnest money, they get that back?
It'd be a recession.
Yeah.
So you take back your contract, any deposits you put down. Yeah, the developer can't, I mean, think about all the shady developers that would take advantage of that. You know, I can put you under contract and then keep your deposit because I changed my mind, you know, so we're protecting the people here, absolutely.
Check the public.
What was that? Oh, accidental mute. All right, let's see. In a new subdivision, are there any required disclosures? The big
So
thing we talked about these was, what was that?
The road, private or public?
The big thing is the roads, to disclose about the public, private, of the roads, and of course the, you know, the subdivision itself. But yeah, the big disclosure, it could be dedicated public, but there's no guarantee until we have approval from DOT. So that's what we tell our buyer. The hope is it'll be public, but we can't guarantee, we don't know for sure until they're done, until we get that final approval. Let's see. Variance. How many property owners?
One.
The variance? Yep, one. Everybody's showing me. And they're proven of unique hardship versus rezoning. What are we doing if we're rezoning?
What's best for the public's interest?
Maybe. If we're rezoning, we're just changing that use. That's our amendment, our change. So maybe it's zoned residential and we want to change it to residential and commercial to allow businesses to come in. But that rezoning, we're just referring to a change, that amendment in zoning. A variance is one homeowner proving that unique hardship. And if they're granted the variance, they've been given permission to break the rules, to deviate from the rules. Let's see, what was the, what do we call this? The local in nature?
The Enabling Act?
The Enabling Act says that zoning is local in nature, which again, Raleigh can't come to Winston and say, this is how you're going to do your zoning. Winston gets to determine Winston's zoning. Greensboro gets to determine Greensboro. Raleigh determines Raleigh. The Enabling Act tells us that zoning is local in nature, which gives municipalities the rights to regulate their own zoning, to regulate how their land is used. Subdivision ordinances. An ordinance is a law, by the way. So an ordinance would be like our covenants. And setting these up is going to be the creation of them is going to have to go through the public land use control, the government. You can't just start building without the permission. Once they're in, then private ordinances kick in, and that's called our HOAs. So they start with public approval, public government, and our HOAs are privately enforced. Good night tonight. Lots of zoning stuff. I know zoning isn't the most exciting thing in pre-licensing, but you know, It's introducing us to these terms, these concepts. So let's talk about next week, and let's talk about what we're going to look at. So I got one more little section to cover in Unit 2. We've already talked about some of it, such as surveys and stuff, but we're going to talk about legal descriptions and how we can define or find those legal descriptions. There's also a little bit of math. So the rest of Unit 2, if math isn't your thing, if you haven't looked ahead, please, doesn't hurt you to go ahead and look at it, and we can talk about that first next week. Once we get through Unit 2, then we get going on Unit 3. Unit 3 is agency. Unit 3 is big. Unit 3 is heavily tested. Unit 3 is teaching us how we work with buyers, sellers, landlords, tenants. If you haven't started reading ahead, please, please, please start with Unit 3. Now we're going to be in it all next week, maybe a little bit even to the following week. Unit 3 is big. Again, you guys, I promise you, if you look ahead, Unit 3 next week is going to be a lot easier to digest, a lot easier to take. Agency is one of those things. It's not a one and done. Agency is one of those things that you need to revisit. The more times you hear it, the better it's going to get, the easier it's going to get. So promise me you'll start this weekend with Unit 3 as your first exposure to agency, and then we'll roll into it next week. And we just keep moving. Do I have any last minute questions or comments, concerns?
You said we should make flashcards for zoning.
Those zoning terms, I think that's a great way to get those just a basic knowledge.
And what about, because I've been doing like every how can I say, like, I guess the definitions.
Mhm.
I've been like doing flashes for like all the definitions. Should I not? Do I have to?
Well, Dee, I mean, you're welcome to do your own flashcards, but I'm telling you, if you're trying to do one for every definition, you're going to have a stack of flashcards that's as tall as you are times 3. So what I recommend is flashcards for the words that you're not sure of, the ones that you're struggling with, and as you get better with them, more comfortable with them, then
Get
you
rid of
can put it off to the side. I don't know that doing one for everything is the best practice, just because you guys are learning a lot of new words, So if it's something that's not sticking, then that could be a good candidate for a flashcard. And don't forget, y'all got flashcards in Learn Test Pass as well.
Mhm.
So I hope you're working through Learn Test Pass.
Yeah, with the Learn Test Pass, so I read my book more than I do the reading, because you know how you can flip the little pages on the
Mhm.
Learn Test Pass, and I can't zoom in how I want to, but I don't like really read it. Does that count if I don't flip through the book on Learn Test Pass? But I do.
All you have to do is meet the class attendance requirements, take the 3 practice tests, and pass the end of class exam.
Oh, yeah, and another question, the practice test, is it on Learn Test Pass?
It is. And it's
Okay.
after we get our first one is after Unit 5. So we still got
Okay.
a little ways to go. I will certainly let you know when our first test.
I was enrolled in some practice tests.
Oh, there's so much out there. Y'all just be careful going to Google as your resource.
No. It's in Learn Test Pass.
Okay, cool. So if you want a supplemental, if you want additional resources, but guys, save your wallet, go through the book and Learn Test Pass before you start buying other stuff. You've already bought this. Everybody with me? You go out and buy all you want, but if you don't use it, it's not going to do you any good. So start with what you got, and then you can see about if you want to see about getting more if you feel like you need additional help. Do we need passing grades for the 3 practice tests? No. All you have to do is attempt. We talked about this. All you have to do is show me that you tried. You can take those practice tests as seriously as you want. They're not for me. They are for you. Guys, I'm around all weekend. I don't think we're going far this weekend. So what a great opportunity for you guys to study and read Unit 3, right? Everybody, please, no matter where you are this weekend or what you're getting ready to go through tomorrow night, everybody please just be safe. And I will see you guys Tuesday night. We'll do it again next week.
Thanks, Julie.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Everyone.
Night. Thank you.